Rain lashed down like shards of glass, tearing through the darkness. The rickety taxi rattled along the winding, fog-choked road leading to St. Agatha's Convent, nestled in the desolate hills of northern England. Clara huddled in the back seat, her hands clutching a worn leather suitcase. Her black novice's habit clung to her frame, damp and suffocating, as if it sought to strangle her past. Her pale blonde hair, tucked beneath a veil, was slick with sweat and rain. At 25, her emerald eyes carried the weight of unseen scars. The driver, a grizzled old man with a face like weathered stone, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You sure about this, sister? This place ain't for the faint of heart." His voice was gravelly, laced with an unspoken warning. Clara nodded, her lips pressed tight. She hadn't come here for faith. She'd come to escape the blood, the screams, and the man she'd lost. The taxi lurched to a stop before the towering iron gates of the convent. Gothic spires pierced the storm clouds, and the stone facade loomed like a slumbering beast. Clara stepped out, the wind whipping her veil. A figure emerged from the shadows, Mother Superior Agnes, a woman in her 60s with a face carved from ice and eyes that seemed to dissect Clara's soul. "You're late, Sister Clara," Agnes said, her voice sharp as a blade. "The Lord values punctuality." "Forgive me, Mother," Clara replied, her voice trembling. "The roads were unkind." Agnes's gaze lingered, as if peeling back Clara's facade. Without another word, she turned, her black robe sweeping the wet cobblestones, and led Clara through the gates. The convent's doors groaned shut behind them, swallowing Clara whole. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wax and mildew. Candlelight flickered across ancient tapestries depicting martyred saints, their eyes seeming to follow her. As Agnes guided her through a labyrinth of stone corridors, Clara's suitcase felt heavier, as if it carried not just her belongings but the weight of her secrets. In her mind, she saw Thomas, his warm smile, his blood pooling on a London street 2 years ago. She blinked the memory away, but the pain lingered, sharp and raw. Agnes stopped at a small wooden door. "Your cell, sister. Rest now. Tomorrow, you begin your duties." Her tone was final, her eyes unyielding. Clara nodded, stepping into the sparse room, a cot, a crucifix, a single candle. As the door closed, she set her suitcase down and opened it, her fingers trembling. Beneath a folded shawl, she found a photograph, Thomas, laughing, his arm around her. She pressed it to her lips, tears welling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. A gust of wind rattled the window, and for a moment, she thought she heard a voice whisper, "Clara." She spun around, heart pounding. The room was empty, but the candle's flame flickered wildly, casting shadows that seemed to writhe. Dawn broke grey and heavy, the convent shrouded in mist. Clara stood among the nuns in St. Agatha's chapel, a cavernous chamber of soaring arches and stained glass. The air was thick with incense, and the low hum of Latin prayers filled the space. The other nuns, their faces obscured by veils, knelt in perfect rows, their movements mechanical, almost ghostly. Clara felt like an intruder, her novice's habit a costume she didn't belong in. Her eyes wandered to the altar, where a massive crucifix loomed, Christ's carved face twisted in agony. Above it, a stained glass window depicted a veiled woman, her hands outstretched, her eyes hollow. The image unnerved Clara, as if the figure were watching her. A rustle broke her thoughts. Across the aisle, a nun turned her head, her veil shifting to reveal striking features. Sister Evelyn, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like smoldering coals. Her gaze locked onto Clara, intense, almost predatory. Clara's breath caught, and she looked away, her cheeks warming. Evelyn's stare lingered, a silent challenge. After the service, Mother Agnes assigned Clara her duties. "You'll work in the library, cataloguing texts," Agnes said, her tone clipped. "Idle hands breed sin." Clara nodded, following Sister Rose, a timid woman in her 40s with a nervous habit of wringing her hands. The library was a maze of towering shelves, the air heavy with the musty scent of old parchment. Dust motes danced in slants of light from narrow windows, and the silence was oppressive. Rose handed Clara a stack of manuscripts. "Be careful," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Some books, they are not meant to be read." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" Rose's eyes darted to the door. "Just do your work, sister." She scurried away, leaving Clara alone. As Clara sorted the texts, her fingers brushed a leather-bound volume tucked behind others, its cover embossed with a veiled figure matching the chapel's window. She opened it, revealing handwritten pages in faded ink. The words spoke of a Sister Margaret, a nun who vanished in 1963 after defying the veil's will. Clara's pulse quickened. The veil, what was it? A shadow fell across the page. Clara gasped, slamming the book shut. Evelyn stood there, her lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "Curious, aren't you?" Evelyn's voice was low, almost a purr. "Be careful, novice. Some secrets bite." Clara clutched the book, her heart racing. Evelyn's fingers grazed her wrist, a touch both soft and electric, before she turned and glided away, her veil trailing like a spectre. Night fell, and Clara lay on her cot, the convent silence pressing against her like a physical weight. The photograph of Thomas rested beneath her pillow, a fragile tether to the life she'd lost. She closed her eyes, willing sleep, but memories clawed their way to the surface. London, 1983. A rainy alley. Clara, then known as Emily, laughed with Thomas, their hands intertwined. They were artists, dreamers, planning a future together. Then, shadows moved, 3 men, knives glinting. Thomas fought back, his fists bloodied, but a blade found his chest. Clara screamed as he fell, his eyes fading. A figure watched from the alley's end, cloaked in black, a veil obscuring their face. A nun. Clara jolted awake, her breath ragged. The room was freezing, the candle extinguished. A faint whisper slithered through the air, "Emily," she fumbled for a match, her hands shaking as she relit the candle. The flame cast jagged shadows, and for a moment, she swore she saw a veiled figure in the corner. She blinked, and it was gone. Desperate to calm her nerves, Clara retrieved Thomas's photograph, tracing his face. "I should have saved you," she murmured. The guilt was a knife in her chest. After his death, she'd fled to the convent, seeking refuge from the world, and from the mysterious nun she'd seen that night. But now, the convent felt like a trap. A soft creak broke the silence. Clara froze. The door to her cell was ajar, though she was certain she'd locked it. She crept forward, peering into the corridor. The candlelight revealed muddy footprints leading away, vanishing into the darkness. Her stomach churned. Someone, or something, had been in her room. She followed the footprints, her bare feet cold against the stone floor. The trail led to a spiral staircase descending into the convent's underbelly. The air grew colder, thicker, as if the walls themselves were breathing. At the bottom, a rusted iron door stood, its surface etched with the same veiled figure from the library book. Clara reached for the handle, but a low, guttural moan echoed from beyond. She stumbled back, heart pounding, and fled to her cell, locking the door behind her. Morning brought no relief. Clara joined the nuns in the dining hall, a long, dim room with warped wooden tables. The meal was meager, bread and thin soup, but the silence was heavier, broken only by the clink of spoons. Clara felt eyes on her, though when she looked, the nuns' faces were bowed, hidden by their veils. Sister Lydia, a young nun with a rebellious streak, sat beside Clara. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Lydia whispered, her eyes glinting with mischief. Clara hesitated, then leaned closer. "Last night, I heard something. And saw footprints." Lydia's smirk faded. "You're not the first. The walls here, they talk. Moans, scratches. I've heard them too." Before Clara could press further, Mother Agnes rose, her presence silence in the room. "Sister Clara," she said, her voice cutting through the air, "you will assist Sister Rose in the garden today. Idle curiosity is a sin." Clara nodded, but her mind raced. The footprints, the book, the whispers, they were pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. After breakfast, she followed Rose to the convent's garden, a tangled expanse of thorns and wilted roses encircled by high stone walls. The sky was leaden, the air damp. Rose worked in silence, her hands trembling as she pruned. Clara seized the moment. "Sister Rose, what's the veil?" "I found a book." Rose dropped her shears, her face paling. "Don't speak of it," she hissed, glancing at the convent's windows. "They are listening." "Who?" Clara pressed, stepping closer. Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Order. They've always been here, since the convent was built. They protect something. Or feed it." Clara's blood ran cold. "Feed what?" Rose shook her head, tears welling. "Please, sister. Stop asking. For your own sake." As Rose fled back to the convent, Clara lingered, her eyes drawn to a crumbling statue in the garden center, a veiled woman, her stone hands stained with what looked like rust. Or blood. Clara approached, her fingers brushing the statue's base. The ground beneath felt soft, unnatural. She knelt, digging with her hands, and unearthed a small, tarnished locket. Inside was a faded photograph of a young nun, her face eerily similar to Evelyn's. A shadow loomed behind her. Clara spun, heart in her throat, but it was only the wind, rustling the thorns. Yet as she clutched the locket, a faint, chilling laugh echoed from the convent's walls, as if the stones themselves were mocking her. Clara's fingers trembled as she clutched the tarnished locket, its cold metal biting into her palm. The photograph inside, a young nun with features hauntingly similar to Sister Evelyn's, stared back at her, the faded image like a ghost trapped in time. The convent's garden was silent, save for the wind hissing through the thorny roses. The veiled statue loomed above her, its stone eyes seeming to judge her intrusion. Clara's heart pounded. She'd unearthed something forbidden, and the convent's walls seemed to tighten around her. She slipped the locket into her habit pocket and hurried back to her cell, the muddy hem of her robe dragging across the stone floors. The corridors were empty, but the air felt heavy, as if unseen eyes tracked her every step. Back in her room, she locked the door and lit a candle, its frail light casting jittery shadows. She examined the locket again, noticing a faint inscription on the back, "To A, Forever Bound, 1962. The initials sent a chill down her spine. Who was A? And why did the nun in the photograph resemble Evelyn? A soft knock startled her. Clara hid the locket under her pillow, next to Thomas's photograph, and opened the door a crack. Sister Lydia, the rebellious young nun from breakfast, stood there, her dark eyes glinting with curiosity. "You look like you dug up a grave," Lydia said, slipping inside without invitation. Her veil was slightly askew, revealing a cascade of chestnut curls. "I found something," Clara whispered, hesitating. Could she trust Lydia? The younger nun's defiance felt like a lifeline in this suffocating place. A locket, in the garden. It had a picture of a nun who looks like Sister Evelyn. Lydia's smirk vanished. "Show me." Clara retrieved the locket, and Lydia's face paled as she studied the photograph. This could be Sister Abigail. She disappeared years ago, before I came here. The older nuns don't talk about her, but I've heard whispers. They say she was trouble. Trouble how? Clara pressed. Lydia glanced at the door, lowering her voice. She asked too many questions, like you. About the veil. Some say she was punished. Others say she ran away. But no one leaves St. Agatha's, Clara. Not alive. Clara's stomach twisted. The book she'd found in the library mentioned Sister Margaret's defiance of the veil, and now Abigail. How many nuns had vanished under this roof? Before she could ask more, a low, guttural moan echoed through the walls, like a beast stirring in its sleep. Lydia grabbed Clara's arm, her nails digging in. "That's what I told you about. The walls. They're alive." The moan faded, leaving an oppressive silence. Clara's candle flickered, and for a moment, the shadow seemed to form a veiled figure in the corner. She blinked, and it was gone. "We need to find out what's happening here," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Lydia nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. "Be careful, Clara. If Mother Agnes catches you snooping, you'll wish you'd never come." The next morning, Clara returned to the library, her mind buzzing with questions. The locket, the book, the moans in the walls, they were threads of a tapestry she couldn't yet see. The library was a cavern of shadows, its shelves groaning under the weight of centuries-old texts. Clara worked alone, sorting manuscripts, but her eyes kept drifting to the spot where she'd found a book about Sister Margaret. As she reached for a dusty tome, a small, leather-bound journal slipped from the shelf, landing at her feet with a thud. Its cover was plain, unadorned, but the pages inside were filled with frantic, handwritten notes. The author identified herself as Sister Beatrice, a nun who'd lived at St. Agatha's in the 1950s. Her words were a fevered confession. "The veil is no myth. It hungers, and we feed it. Sister Margaret saw the truth, and they silenced her. I hear it in the walls, calling my name. Mother Superior knows, but her soul is bound to it. If I speak, I'll be next. Clara's hand shook as she read. The journal described secret rituals in the convent steps, led by an inner circle called the Order of the Shroud. Beatrice wrote of blood, of screams, of nuns who vanished after defying the order. The final entry was a single, chilling line, "It's coming for me." Clara closed the journal, her pulse racing. She hid it inside her habit, determined to uncover more. As she turned, she nearly collided with Sister Rose, whose pale face was etched with panic. "You shouldn't be here alone," Rose stammered, her eyes darting to the shelves. "The library, it's not safe." "I'm just doing my work," Clara said, forcing calm. But Rose's fear was contagious, and Clara noticed the older nun's hands trembling. Rose stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "You found something, didn't you? Like Sister Abigail did. She used to sneak in here, reading things she shouldn't. Then she was gone." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Clara, stop before it's too late." Before Clara could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor. Rose gasped and fled, leaving Clara alone as Mother Agnes entered, her presence like a storm cloud. "Sister Clara," Agnes said, her voice cold, "you seem distracted. Perhaps the library is too taxing for a novice." Clara met her gaze, her heart pounding. "I'm managing, Mother." Agnes's eyes narrowed, as if she could see the journal hidden against Clara's chest. "See that you do," she said, then turned and left, her robes whispering against the stone. Clara exhaled, but the air felt colder, and a faint whisper slithered from the shelves, "Clara." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The journal's words burned in her mind, and the locket felt like a weight in her pocket. She sat on her cot, rereading Sister Beatrice's entries by candlelight, when a soft tap came at her door. She tensed, expecting Agnes, but it was Sister Evelyn, her veil pushed back to reveal her striking features. In the dim light, her beauty was almost otherworldly, her eyes glinting with a mix of mischief and danger. "You're up late, novice," Evelyn said, slipping inside and closing the door. Her voice was low, teasing, but there was an edge to it. "What's keeping you awake? Ghosts?" Clara's cheeks flushed, caught off guard by Evelyn's presence. The older nun's closeness sent a shiver through her, a mix of fear and something she didn't dare name. "I couldn't sleep," she said, tucking the journal under her blanket. Evelyn's lips curved into a smile, and she sat on the cot, far too close. "You're not like the others, Clara. You've got fire in you. But fire burns out fast here." Her fingers brushed Clara's hand, lingering a moment too long. The touch was electric, forbidden, and Clara pulled away, her heart racing. "I'm just trying to understand this place," Clara said, her voice unsteady. "There are things that don't make sense. Like Sister Abigail." Evelyn's smile faded, and for a moment, her mask slipped, revealing a flicker of pain. "Abigail was my friend," she said softly. "She was curious, like you. Too curious. And now she's gone." Her eyes locked onto Clara's, intense and searching. "Don't follow her path, Clara. It leads to darkness." Clara wanted to ask more, but Evelyn stood, her veil falling back into place. "Be careful who you trust," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not everyone here is what they seem." She left as silently as she'd come, leaving Clara breathless and confused. Alone again, Clara opened the locket, staring at the photograph of the nun who might be Abigail. The resemblance to Evelyn was uncanny, but the pain in Evelyn's voice suggested a deeper connection. Was Evelyn hiding something? Or was she, too, a victim of the convent's secrets? As Clara blew out the candle, a faint scratching sound came from the wall behind her cot, like nails clawing at stone. She froze, her breath shallow. The scratching grew louder, then stopped, replaced by a single, chilling word, mine. The following day, Clara sought answers in the convent's graveyard, a desolate patch of earth beyond the garden, encircled by gnarled yews. The sky was a bruise, heavy with the threat of rain. Clara had slipped away during afternoon prayers, driven by the journal's mention of a marked grave tied to the Order of the Shroud. She needed proof, something to make sense of the horrors creeping into her reality. The graveyard was a maze of weathered headstones, many so old their names had eroded. Clara moved carefully, her eyes scanning for anything unusual. Near the center, she found it, a small, unmarked stone, half buried in moss, etched with the same veiled figure from the library book on the rusted door. Her pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. She knelt, brushing away dirt, and noticed the soil was loose, as if recently disturbed. With a stick, she dug, her hands trembling. A few inches down, she uncovered a bundle of cloth, stained and brittle. Inside was a collection of small bones, human, possibly a child's, and a silver ring engraved with the initials AB. Clara's breath caught. Abigail? Beatrice? The bones were a grim confirmation of the journal's warnings. A twig snapped behind her. Clara spun, clutching the ring, and saw Sister Rose standing at the graveyard's edge, her face ashen. "You shouldn't be here," Rose whispered, her voice trembling. "They'll know. They always know." "Who?" Clara demanded, standing. "The Order? Mother Agnes." Rose shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The veil. It sees everything. It takes what it wants." She pointed at the stone. "That's where they buried her. Abigail." She tried to run, but they caught her. They always do. Clara's blood ran cold. "Why didn't you stop them?" Rose sobbed, collapsing to her knees. "I was afraid. We all are. You don't understand what it's like to live with it, to hear it in your dreams." Before Clara could press further, a bell tolled, signaling the end of prayers. Rose scrambled to her feet, fleeing toward the convent. Clara hid the ring in her pocket, her mind reeling. The bones, the ring, the order, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Abigail's fate was a warning. But Clara wasn't ready to give up. She'd come to St. Agatha's to escape her past, but now, she was entangled in a nightmare far worse. As she left the graveyard, a cold wind swept through, carrying a whisper that seemed to rise from the earth itself, "You're next." The bell's toll still echoed in Clara's ears as she slipped back into the convent, the silver ring with the initials AB burning a hole in her pocket. The graveyard's grim discovery, human bones, possibly Abigail's, had ignited a fire in her chest. She couldn't turn back now, not when the truth was so close, yet so shrouded in dread. The convent's stone wall seemed to pulse with malice, as if the very building resented her probing. She needed answers, and the chapel, with its looming stained glass figure of the veiled woman, felt like the heart of St. Agatha's secrets. Clara waited until the evening prayers, when the nuns gathered in the cavernous chapel. She lingered at the back, her novice's veil casting shadows over her face, and watched the others kneel in eerie unison. The air was thick with incense, the Latin chants a low, hypnotic drone. Mother Agnes stood at the altar, her stern gaze sweeping the room like a hawk. Clara's eyes darted to Sister Evelyn, whose veil was slightly raised, revealing a flicker of defiance. Evelyn caught her stare and held it, a silent challenge that sent a shiver through Clara, part fear, part forbidden longing. As the prayers ended, the nuns filed out, but Clara lingered, pretending to adjust her veil. When the chapel emptied, she crept toward the altar, her heart pounding. The stained glass window above glowed faintly in the candlelight, the veiled woman's hollow eyes seeming to follow her. Clara's fingers brushed the altar's edge, searching for anything out of place. She noticed a small, ornate panel in the stone, barely visible, etched with the same veiled symbol she'd seen in the graveyard and library. With trembling hands, she pressed the panel. A soft click echoed, and a hidden compartment slid open, revealing a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a black ribbon. Clara's breath caught. She glanced over her shoulder, ensuring she was alone, and untied the ribbon. The letters were written in a flowing, desperate hand, addressed to "My beloved A." The signature at the bottom read, "E. Evelyn?" Clara's mind raced. The letters spoke of a forbidden love, of secret meetings in the convent's crypt, and of a plan to escape St. Agatha's. The final letter was a plea, "They know, the order will never let us go. Meet me at the Veiled Stone. If we don't run, we'll die." Clara's hand shook as she read. Abigail and Evelyn had been lovers, defying the convent's rigid vows. But the order of the Shroud, whatever it was, had caught them. The bones in the graveyard, the ring with AB, it all pointed to Abigail's fate. Clara's chest tightened with a mix of rage and sorrow. The injustice of it, the cruelty of silencing love, mirrored her own loss of Thomas. She clutched the letters, vowing to uncover the truth, not just for Abigail, but for herself. A floorboard creaked behind her. Clara spun, stuffing the letters into her habit. Sister Rose stood in the doorway, her face pale as death. "Clara, what are you doing?" Rose's voice was a terrified whisper. "You can't be here. If they find you..." "Who are they?" Clara snapped, stepping closer. "The Order? The Veil? Tell me, Rose." Rose's eyes darted to the altar, then back to Clara. "You don't understand," she whimpered. "The Veil isn't just a story. It's real. It watches us, feeds on us." Abigail learned it the hard way. She grabbed Clara's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Leave it alone, or you'll end up like her." Clara pulled free, her resolve hardening. "I'm not afraid," she lied, though her heart pounded. Rose sobbed and fled, her footsteps echoing in the empty chapel. As Clara turned to leave, a gust of wind snuffed out the candles, plunging the room into darkness. A low, guttural whisper slithered from the shadows, "You will be." Clara stumbled back to her cell, the letters and ring hidden against her chest, the chapel's whisper still ringing in her ears. The convent's corridors were a maze of shadows, the air thick with an unnatural cold. She locked her door and sank onto her cot, her mind a whirlwind. Abigail's fate, Evelyn's secrets, the order of the Shroud, it was all connected, and the veil, whatever it was, lay at the center. But what terrified her most was a growing suspicion her own past, her loss of Thomas, might be tangled in this nightmare. She pulled out Thomas's photograph, her fingers tracing his familiar smile. The memory of that night in London, 1983, surged back, his blood on the cobblestones, the veiled figure watching from the alley's end. At the time, she'd thought it a hallucination, a trick of her grief-stricken mind. But now, in the suffocating walls of St. Agatha's, she wasn't so sure. Had that figure been one of the Order? Had they targeted Thomas to drive her here, to this place of secrets and death? Desperate for clarity, Clara retrieved Sister Beatrice's journal from its hiding place under her mattress. She flipped to a later entry, one she'd skimmed before, and froze. Beatrice wrote of a stranger who'd come to the convent in 1958, a man seeking his lost sister, a nun. The Order had turned him away, but Beatrice overheard whispers of his fate. They sent him to the city, to die in shadows, so his questions would die with him. Clara's blood ran cold. The city. A man silenced. It was too familiar, too close to Thomas's death. Her hands trembled as she opened a bundle of letters from the chapel. One, tucked at the bottom, wasn't a love letter but a warning, written in a different hand, Abigail's, judging by the initials AB. It read, E, they are watching us. The Order has eyes beyond these walls. They've done it before, send men to their deaths to protect the veil. The stranger from 58, the artist from 63. They'll do it again. We must leave tonight. Clara's breath hitched. The artist from 63. Thomas had been an artist, like her. But he died in 83, not 63. Yet the pattern was undeniable, men connected to the convent, silenced in the city. Her mind raced, piecing together a horrifying possibility. Had Thomas known something about St. Agatha's? Had he been investigating the convent, perhaps for her sake, and paid the price? The veiled figure in the alley, had it been sent by the Order to ensure his silence? A sharp knock at her door jolted her from her thoughts. She hid the journal and letters, her heart hammering. "Who's there?" she called, her voice shaking. "It's me," came Sister Lydia's voice, urgent and low. Clara opened the door, and Lydia slipped inside, her face flushed with excitement. "I found something," she said, holding up a small, crumpled note. It was in the laundry, tucked in an old habit. "Look." Clara took the note, her eyes widening as she read, "The crypt holds the truth. Find the veiled door before the feast of Saint Agatha. A.B. The feast was tomorrow." Clara's pulse raced. Abigail had left a trail, and it led to the crypt, the same place mentioned in Evelyn's letters. "We have to go," Clara said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "Tonight." Lydia hesitated, then nodded. "You're crazy, Clara." "But I'm in." As they prepared to sneak out, a low, mournful wail rose from the walls, like a chorus of lost souls. Clara clutched Thomas's photograph, her resolve steeling. She'd come to St. Agatha's to escape her past, but it had followed her, entwined with the convent's darkness. The veil was watching, and time was running out. The convent was a tomb at midnight, its stone corridors swallowing sound and light. Clara and Sister Lydia crept through the shadows, their breaths shallow, the note from Abigail's habit clutched in Clara's hand. "The crypt holds the truth. Find the veiled door before the feast of Saint Agatha." The feast was mere hours away, and the weight of their discovery, the letters, the ring, the bones, pressed against Clara's chest like a physical burden. The veil, whatever it was no longer just a whisper in the walls. It was a presence, watching, waiting. Lydia's candle cast flickering shadows, illuminating the spiral staircase Clara had found days ago, its steps descending into the convent's underbelly. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, blood, perhaps. Clara's heart pounded, but she thought of Thomas, his death in that London alley, and the veiled figure who'd watched. If the crypt held answers, she'd face whatever lay below. At the bottom, the rusted iron door loomed, its surface etched with the veiled woman's symbol. Lydia hesitated, her eyes wide. "Clara, this feels wrong. Like we're walking into a trap." "We don't have a choice," Clara whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. She pushed the door, and it groaned open, revealing a narrow passage carved into the rock. The walls were slick with moisture, etched with faint, spiraling runes that seemed to pulse in the candlelight. Clara's skin prickled, as if the runes were alive, whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. The passage opened into a vast crypt, its ceiling lost in darkness. Stone sarcophagi lined the walls, their lids carved with veiled figures, their hands clasped in prayer, or restraint. In the center stood a circular stone platform, its surface stained a deep, unnatural red. Clara's stomach churned. This was no place of rest, it was a place of sacrifice. Lydia gasped, pointing to a wooden door at the far end, half hidden behind a crumbling statue. Its frame was carved with the veiled symbol, just as Abigail's note described. Clara approached, her fingers brushing the wood, and felt a jolt, like static, but colder, wrong. She pushed, and the door creaked open, revealing a smaller chamber. Inside, a single object rested on a stone pedestal, a black velvet pouch, embroidered with silver threads forming the veiled symbol. Clara opened the pouch, her hands trembling, and found a small, obsidian amulet, its surface engraved with runes matching those on the walls. As she held it, a low hum filled the air, and a candle flickered wildly. Lydia grabbed her arm. "Clara, put it back. Now." Before Clara could respond, the crypt's air thickened, and a shadow moved in the corner, a formless mass, like ink spilling upward. A voice, neither male nor female, rasped from the darkness, "You trespass." The shadow lunged, and Clara shoved Lydia behind her, clutching the amulet. The shadow recoiled, as if the amulet burned it, and vanished into the walls. Lydia's face was ashen. "What was that?" "I don't know," Clara said, slipping the amulet into her pocket. "But Abigail wanted us to find this. It's our only lead." They fled the crypt, the veiled door slamming shut behind them, its echo like a warning. Back in Clara's cell, the amulet lay on her cot, its obsidian surface seeming to absorb the candlelight. Clara and Lydia sat in tense silence, the weight of their discovery pressing down. The crypt, the shadow, the runes, it was all real, and the veil was no mere legend. Clara's mind raced, piecing together the clues, Abigail's letters, Beatrice's journal, the bones in the graveyard. The Order of the Shroud was hiding something monstrous, and the amulet was a key. Lydia broke the silence, her voice shaking. "That thing in the crypt, it wasn't human. We're in over our heads, Clara. We should burn that amulet and forget this." "No," Clara said firmly, her eyes on the amulet. "Abigail died for this. Thomas might have died for it too. I won't stop until I know why. She thought of the veiled figure in the London alley, the possibility that Thomas's death was no random act but a deliberate strike by the Order. The injustice of it fueled her resolve. Lydia sighed, running a hand through her curls. You're stubborn as hell. Fine, but we need help. There's another novice, Sister Miriam, who's been asking questions too. She's quiet, but sharp. I trust her. Clara nodded, though trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Find her. But be careful. If Mother Agnes or the Order catch us. I know, Lydia said, standing. I'll bring Miriam tonight. Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone. She slipped out, leaving Clara alone with the amulet and her thoughts. Clara picked up the amulet, its cold surface sending a shiver through her. She closed her eyes, and an image flashed in her mind, Thomas, standing in the crypt, his face pale, his hands reaching for her. She gasped, dropping the amulet, her heart pounding. Was it a vision, or the veil manipulating her grief? She couldn't tell, but the amulet's power was undeniable, and dangerous. A soft knock interrupted her. Expecting Lydia, Clara opened the door, but it was Sister Evelyn, her veil pushed back, her eyes glinting with an intensity that made Clara's breath catch. You're playing with fire, Clara, Evelyn said, stepping inside without invitation. Her presence filled the small room, her perfume, a mix of roses and something darker, overwhelming. How did you know I was here? Clara asked, stepping back, her hand instinctively covering the amulet. Evelyn's lips curved into a half-smile. I know more than you think. You were in the crypt, weren't you? I saw you and Lydia sneaking back. She moved closer, her fingers brushing Clara's arm, a touch that sent a forbidden thrill through her. Whatever you found, it's not worth your life. Clara's cheeks flushed, torn between suspicion and the pull of Evelyn's gaze. You knew Abigail, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You loved her. And the Order took her from you. Why won't you help me? Evelyn's face hardened, pain flashing in her eyes. Because I've seen what happens to those who fight the veil. Abigail thought she could win, and now she's gone. I won't lose you too. Her voice broke, and for a moment, Clara saw not the defiant nun but a woman haunted by loss. Before Clara could respond, Evelyn leaned in, her lips inches from Clara's, then pulled back, as if fighting herself. Stay away from the crypt, she whispered, and left as swiftly as she'd come, leaving Clara breathless and confused. The feast of Saint Agatha dawned grey and oppressive, the convent buzzing with preparations. Clara hid the amulet in her cell, its runes etched in her mind. She joined the other nuns in the chapel, where Mother Agnes led a solemn mass, her voice resonating with a fervor that felt performative. The stained glass-veiled woman seemed to loom larger today, its hollow eyes boring into Clara. She scanned the room, spotting Lydia and a new face, Sister Miriam, a slight, bespectacled novice with a quiet intensity. Lydia caught her eye and nodded subtly, confirming Miriam's alliance. After the mass, the nuns gathered in the dining hall for a rare feast, roasted pheasant, bread, and wine, a stark contrast to their usual fare. Clara sat with Lydia and Miriam, her mind on the crypt and the amulet. Miriam leaned in, her voice barely audible. Lydia told me about the crypt. I've been searching the archives. There's a record of a relic, an amulet, brought to St. Agatha's in the 12th century. It's tied to something called the Veil, a force the founders worshipped. Clara's pulse quickened. Worshipped? So the Order isn't just protecting it, they're serving it. Miriam nodded, adjusting her glasses. The records are vague, but they mention sacrifices. Nuns who defied the Order disappeared, their deaths blamed on illness or accidents. I think Abigail was one of them. Clara's thoughts turned to the bones in the graveyard, the letters in the chapel. The injustice of it, nuns silenced, their lives erased, made her blood boil. "We need to get back to the crypt," she said. Abigail's note said the veil door holds the truth. Lydia frowned. "Tonight's impossible. The feast means extra prayers, and Agnes will have eyes everywhere." "Then we go now," Clara said, her voice firm. "While they are distracted." Miriam hesitated, then nodded. "I'm in. But we need a plan." The crypts guarded during the feast, Sister Rose mentioned sentries. Before they could strategize, a hush fell over the hall. Mother Agnes stood, raising a goblet of wine. "Sisters," she said, her voice smooth but laced with menace, "today we honor Street Agatha, who gave her life for purity. Let us also honor obedience, for it binds us to God, and to each other." Her eyes locked onto Clara, a silent warning. As the nuns drank, Clara felt a chill, as if the veil itself were toasting her doom. She glanced at the veiled woman's statue in the corner, its stone face seeming to smirk. A faint hum, like the one in the crypt, pulsed in her ears, and for a moment, she saw Thomas's face in the crowd, his eyes pleading. She blinked, and he was gone, but the vision left her shaken. Clara, Lydia, and Miriam slipped away during the post-feast clean-up, the convent's corridors eerily quiet. The amulet was tucked in Clara's habit, its weight a constant reminder of the danger ahead. They reached the spiral staircase, its darkness swallowing their candle's light. Clara led the way, her heart pounding, the memory of the crypt shadow fresh in her mind. This time, they were prepared, or so she hoped. At the crypt's entrance, they found a rusted door ajar, a faint glow seeping from within. Clara's stomach twisted. "Someone's here," she whispered. Lydia gripped her arm, but Miriam pushed forward, her curiosity outweighing her fear. They crept inside, the crypt's air colder, heavier than before. The sarcophagi seemed to lean inward, their carved figures watching. The central platform's red stains glistened, as if freshly wet. At the veiled door, a figure stood, Sister Rose, her face contorted with fear and rage, a heavy iron key in her hand. "You shouldn't have come," Rose hissed, her voice trembling. "I warned you, Clara. The veil demands loyalty." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. "What did they do to Abigail, Rose? What are you hiding?" Rose's eyes darted to the door, then back to Clara. "You don't understand. The veil gives us purpose. Without it, we're nothing." Her voice cracked, and Clara saw not a villain but a woman broken by fear. Lydia moved to flank Rose, but the older nun lunged, swinging the key like a weapon. Clara dodged, grabbing Rose's wrist, and a struggle ensued. Miriam tackled Rose from behind, and the key clattered to the floor. Rose screamed, a sound that echoed unnaturally, as if the crypt itself were amplifying her pain. The air thickened, and the shadow from before reappeared, coalescing into a towering, veiled form. Its voice boomed, Defilers! The amulet in Clara's pocket burned, and she raised it instinctively, its runes glowing. The shadow shrieked, retreating into the walls, but not before Rose collapsed, her eyes rolling back, blood trickling from her nose. Lydia knelt beside her, checking her pulse. She's alive, but what was that thing? Clara clutched the amulet, her hands shaking. The veil. And it's not done with us. She picked up the key, its weight heavy with promise and peril. The veiled door beckoned, and beyond it, the truth about Abigail, Thomas, and the Order waited. Clara's hand trembled as she gripped the iron key, its cold weight a promise of answers and danger. The crypt's air was suffocating, thick with the stench of decay and the lingering echo of Sister Rose's scream. The veiled door loomed before her, its carved symbol pulsing faintly, as if alive. Lydia and Miriam stood at her side, their faces pale but resolute. The shadow of the veil had retreated, but its presence lingered, a predator waiting to strike. Clara knew they were running out of time. The feast of Saint Agatha was in full swing above, and the Order of the Shroud would soon notice their absence. She inserted the key, the lock grinding with a sound like bones snapping. The door swung inward, revealing a narrow, descending tunnel, its walls slick with black moss and etched with more of the spiraling runes Clara had seen in the crypt. A faint, rhythmic hum emanated from below, like a heartbeat. "This is it," Clara whispered, clutching the obsidian amulet. "Abigail's truth is down there." Lydia's eyes darted to the unconscious Rose, slumped against a sarcophagus. What if she wakes up? Or worse, what if that thing comes back? "We'll deal with it," Clara said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. She thought of Thomas, his bloodied body in that London alley, and the veiled figure who'd watched. If the Order had orchestrated his death, she'd make them pay. "Stay close." Miriam adjusted her glasses, her scholarly demeanor masking her nerves. "The runes, they're older than the convent. Pre-Christian, maybe. This place isn't just a crypt, it's a shrine." They descended, the tunnel growing colder, the hum louder. The candle's flame flickered, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe like living things. At the tunnel's end, they emerged into a circular chamber, its domed ceiling carved with a massive, veiled figure, its stone eyes hollow and accusing. In the center stood a stone altar, its surface etched with runes and stained with dark, crusted blood. Chains hung from the walls, rusted but intact, their purpose chillingly clear. Clara's gaze fell on a leather-bound tome resting on the altar, its cover embossed with a veiled symbol. She opened it, revealing pages filled with names, dates, and cryptic notes in Latin. Miriam leaned in, translating under her breath. "It's a ledger," she said, her voice shaking. "It lists sacrifices. Nuns, going back centuries. Sister Margaret, Sister Beatrice, Sister Abigail, they are all here. And others, so many others." Clara's stomach churned as she scanned the names, her fingers pausing on an entry from 1983, Thomas Harrow, silenced in London. Threat to the veil. Her breath caught, the world tilting. Thomas. Her Thomas. The Order hadn't just killed him, they targeted him because he'd been close to uncovering their secrets. The injustice of it, the cruelty, ignited a rage that drowned her fear. Before she could speak, the hum surged, and the altar's runes glowed red. The air thickened, and the veiled figure on the ceiling seemed to shift, its stone mouth curling into a smirk. A voice, deep and guttural, echoed from the walls. "You cannot undo what is bound." The chains rattled, and the shadow of the veil coalesced, its form more defined now, a towering, veiled spectre with claw-like hands. Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring, and the spectre hissed, retreating into the shadows but not vanishing. "We need to take the ledger," Clara said, grabbing the tome. "This is proof." Miriam nodded, but Lydia's eyes were wide with terror. "Clara, we're not alone." Footsteps echoed from the tunnel. Someone was coming. Clara shoved the ledger into her habit, her heart hammering as the footsteps grew louder. The crypt's oppressive darkness seemed to close in, the veil's presence a heavy weight on her chest. Lydia and Miriam pressed against the altar, their candles snuffed out by a sudden gust. The only light came from the amulet's faint glow, its runes pulsing like a heartbeat. Clara gripped it tightly, its power their only defense against the spectre lurking in the shadows. "Hide," Clara whispered, pulling Lydia and Miriam behind a chain-draped column. They crouched, barely breathing, as a figure emerged from the tunnel. It was Sister Evelyn, her veil pushed back, her face a mask of conflict. Behind her stood Sister Constance, a gaunt, older nun Clara had seen only in passing, her eyes gleaming with fanaticism. Constance held a lantern, its light casting jagged shadows across the chamber. "They are here," Constance said, her voice sharp. "I heard them. Defilers, meddling where they don't belong." She scanned the room, her lantern sweeping over the altar. "The veil will have their blood." Evelyn's jaw tightened, her eyes searching the shadows. "We don't know it's them, Constance. It could be Rose, or—" "Enough," Constance snapped. "You've grown soft, Evelyn. Abigail's rebellion infected you, and now this novice. I see how you look at her." Her words dripped with venom, and Evelyn flinched, a flicker of pain crossing her face. Clara's heart raced. Evelyn was part of the order, but her hesitation suggested she wasn't fully loyal. The romantic tension between them, the forbidden pull Clara felt, complicated everything. She wanted to trust Evelyn, but Constance's presence was a threat they couldn't ignore. Lydia shifted, her foot scraping the stone, and Constance's head whipped toward them. "There," she barked, raising the lantern. "Come out, or the veil will drag you out." Clara made a split-second decision. She stepped from the shadows, holding the amulet high, its glow illuminating her face. "Leave us alone, Constance," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "We know what the Order's done. Abigail, Beatrice, Thomas, they're all in the ledger." Constance's eyes narrowed, but Evelyn gasped, her gaze locking onto the amulet. "Clara, put that down," she said, her voice urgent. "You don't know what it can do." Constance lunged, her lantern crashing to the floor, plunging the chamber into near darkness. Clara dodged, the amulet's glow guiding her. Lydia and Miriam sprang from hiding, tackling Constance, but the older nun was surprisingly strong, her nails raking Lydia's arm. Clara swung the ledger, striking Constance's shoulder, and the nun staggered, cursing. Evelyn grabbed Clara's wrist, her touch both firm and desperate. "Run, Clara. Now. I'll hold her off." Clara hesitated, torn between distrust and the pull of Evelyn's eyes. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I can't lose you," Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. She shoved Clara toward the tunnel, then turned to face Constance, who was rising, her face twisted with rage. Clara, Lydia, and Miriam fled, the ledger and amulet clutched tightly. Behind them, Constance's screams echoed, followed by a guttural roar, the veil, stirred by the chaos. Clara's heart pounded, Evelyn's words ringing in her ears. She was running toward answers, but also deeper into the convent's darkness. Clara, Lydia, and Miriam stumbled into a disused storeroom on the convent's upper level, barricading the door with a heavy crate. The feast's distant chants drifted through the walls, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd escaped. Clara's hands shook as she set the ledger and amulet on a dusty table, their weight a reminder of the lives lost to the Order's secrets. Evelyn's sacrifice, if that's what it was, gnawed at her, a mix of guilt and longing. Had Evelyn betrayed the Order for her, or was it a ploy? Lydia clutched her bleeding arm, her face pale but defiant. That was too close. Constance is unhinged, and that thing in the crypt, she shuddered, unable to finish. Miriam, ever the scholar, opened the ledger, her eyes scanning the Latin text. This is more than a record of sacrifices, she said, her voice low. It's a history of the veil. It's not a demon, not exactly. It's a force, bound to this place by the founders. The amulet controls it, but only partly. The Order uses it to maintain power, feeding it souls. Clara's stomach twisted. Souls? Like Abigail's? Thomas's? She flipped through the ledger, her eyes landing on an entry from 1962, Sister Abigail, bound to the veil for her defiance. Her lover, spared as a warning. Evelyn. The pain in Evelyn's eyes, her cryptic warnings, it all made sense. She'd loved Abigail, and the Order had punished them both. There's more, Miriam said, pointing to a later entry. 1983, Thomas Harrow, artist, eliminated in London. Connected to E. Harrow, former novice. Miriam looked up, her glasses reflecting the candlelight. E. Harrow. Do you know this name, Clara? Clara's blood ran cold. Thomas's sister, Eliza Harrow, had been a nun, briefly, before leaving the convent in the 1970s. Clara had never met her, but Thomas had spoken of her, saying she'd fled after seeing something terrible. Had Eliza been a novice at St. Agatha's? Had Thomas been investigating her disappearance when he was killed? The pieces were falling into place, each one a dagger in Clara's heart. Thomas was my everything, Clara said, her voice breaking. If he died because of this place, because of the Order, she clenched her fists, the amulet's cold surface grounding her. We need to expose them. Agnes, Constance, all of them. Lydia nodded, tying a rag around her wound. But how? The Order's everywhere. And that veil thing, it's not going to let us walk out with this ledger. Miriam's eyes gleamed with determination. The archives. There's a hidden section I found last week, sealed off. If we can cross-reference the ledger with those records, we might find a way to destroy the veil, or at least weaken it. Clara agreed, but a faint scratching came from the door, like nails on wood. The air grew colder, and the amulet pulsed, its runes glowing faintly. A whisper slithered through the room, no escape. Clara grabbed the ledger, her resolve hardening. The veil was hunting them, and the Order was closing in. The storeroom's door rattled, the scratching growing louder, more insistent. Clara, Lydia, and Miriam froze, the amulet's glow their only light. The whisper of the veil lingered, a chilling promise of retribution. Clara clutched the ledger, its pages a testament to centuries of injustice, nuns sacrificed, lives erased, and now Thomas, her love, a casualty of the Order's cruelty. She wouldn't let his death be in vain. "Someone's out there," Lydia whispered, her eyes wide. She grabbed a rusted candlestick, brandishing it like a weapon. Miriam pushed her glasses up, her scholarly calm cracking under the pressure. Clara moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. The scratching stopped, replaced by a soft, deliberate knock. "Clara," came a muffled voice, Evelyn's. "It's me." "Open the door." Clara's heart skipped. Evelyn had held off Constance, but her ties to the Order made her a risk. Yet the memory of Evelyn's touch, her whispered confession, tugged at Clara's resolve. She glanced at Lydia and Miriam, who shook their heads, but Clara's gut told her to listen. She cracked the door, the amulet ready in her hand. Evelyn slipped inside, her face bruised, her veil torn. Blood streaked her cheek, and her eyes were wild with urgency. "Constance is coming," she said, breathless. "She's rallied the others. They know you have the ledger and the amulet. You have to leave, now." "Why should we trust you?" Lydia snapped, gripping the candlestick. "You're one of them." Evelyn's gaze dropped, pain flashing across her face. "I was," she admitted. "After Abigail, I had no choice. They broke me, made me serve." "But Clara," she looked at Clara, her eyes softening. "You're different. You're not afraid. And I can't watch the veil take you too." Clara's chest tightened, torn between suspicion and the pull of Evelyn's words. "You knew about Thomas," she said, her voice sharp. "The ledger mentions him. And your sister, Eliza. Tell me the truth." Evelyn's face paled. "Eliza was my sister, yes. She was a novice here, like me. She saw the veil, the sacrifices, and ran. I thought she was safe, but Thomas, he came looking for her. He found me, asked questions. I warned him to stop, but the Order found out. They sent someone to London. I didn't know, Clara, I swear." The revelation hit Clara like a blow. Thomas had died because of Eliza, because of the veil. The injustice of it, the loss, fueled her rage. "Then help us stop them," she said, her voice trembling. "No more secrets." Evelyn nodded, tears in her eyes. "The archives. Miriam's right, there's a way to weaken the veil. But we have to move fast." Before they could plan, the door exploded inward, splintered by a heavy blow. Constance stood in the doorway, flanked by two other nuns, their faces hidden by veils. "Traitors," Constance hissed, her eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "The veil will feast tonight." Clara raised the amulet, its runes blazing, and the air crackled with power. The fight for the truth had begun, and there was no turning back. The storm erupted into chaos as Sister Constance and her veiled allies charged, their eyes burning with zeal. Clara raised the obsidian amulet, its runes blazing like embers, casting a harsh glow across the splintered doorframe. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, and the veil's whisper hissed through the walls, blood for blood. Clara's heart pounded, the ledger tucked inside her habit a heavy reminder of the lives, Abigail's, Thomas's, countless others, sacrificed to the Order's fanaticism. She wouldn't let them win. Lydia swung her candlestick, catching one of the veiled nuns in the shoulder. The nun staggered, her veil slipping to reveal a face twisted with fear rather than faith. Miriam, less adept in combat, scrambled to the table, clutching the ledger as if it were a shield. Evelyn stood between Clara and Constance, her stance defiant but her hands trembling. "Constance, stop this," Evelyn pleaded, her voice raw. "The veil doesn't serve us, it uses us." Constance sneered, her gaunt face illuminated by the amulet's light. "You're a traitor, Evelyn, just like Abigail. The veil is our salvation, and you've defiled it." She lunged, a dagger glinting in her hand, its blade etched with the veiled symbol. Clara shoved Evelyn aside, raising the amulet, and a pulse of energy surged from it, knocking Constance back. The dagger clattered to the floor, but the other nuns pressed forward, their movements eerily synchronized, as if guided by an unseen force. Clara's mind raced. The amulet was powerful, but unpredictable. She felt its energy coursing through her, cold and invasive, like the veil itself was probing her soul. She glanced at Evelyn, whose eyes were wide with a mix of fear and something deeper, a longing that made Clara's chest ache. "We need to get to the archives," Clara shouted, dodging a nun's grasp. "Miriam, lead the way." Miriam nodded, clutching the ledger, and bolted for the door, Lydia covering her with wild swings of the candlestick. Clara and Evelyn followed, but Constance recovered, her voice rising in a chilling chant, "Domina Velata, Axad Donum." The walls trembled, and the veil's shadow coalesced behind her, a cowering, veiled spectre with claw-like hands. Its presence was suffocating, its voice a chorus of screams, "Mine." Clara raised the amulet again, its runes flaring brighter, and the spectre recoiled, but not before it lashed out, its claws raking Evelyn's arm. Evelyn cried out, blood seeping through her torn sleeve, but she pushed Clara forward. "Go," she gasped. "I'll hold them off." Clara hesitated, torn between her mission and the pull of Evelyn's sacrifice. But Lydia grabbed her arm, dragging her into the corridor. The last thing Clara saw was Evelyn facing Constance, her silhouette framed by the veil's writhing shadow. The storeroom door slammed shut, muffling Evelyn's cries, and Clara ran, her heart heavy with guilt and resolve. The archives were their only hope, but the veil was awake, and its hunger was growing. The convent's upper corridors were a labyrinth of stone and shadow, the distant chants of the Feast of Saint Agatha a haunting backdrop. Clara, Lydia, and Miriam sprinted toward the archives, the ledger and amulet weighing Clara down like anchors. Evelyn's sacrifice burned in her mind, a mix of betrayal and devotion that left her reeling. Had Evelyn truly turned against the Order, or was this another layer of deception? Clara couldn't dwell on it, not with Constance and the veil on their heels. Miriam led them to a narrow, unmarked door hidden behind a tapestry of a martyred saint. "This is it," she whispered, her glasses fogged with sweat. "The sealed section. I found it by accident last month." She pushed the door open, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. The air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and old ink. They descended, their footsteps echoing in the cramped space. The archives were a wine of shelves, crammed with scrolls, books, and crumbling parchments. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by their single candle. Miriam navigated the maze with practiced ease, stopping at a locked iron grate barring a small alcove. "The restricted records," she said, producing a hairpin. "Give me a second." As Miriam worked the lock, Clara opened the ledger, her eyes scanning the entries. The names of sacrificed nuns stretched back to the convent's founding in the 12th century, each death tied to a ritual to appease the veil. One entry caught her attention, 1174, the amulet of binding, forged to chain the veil, stolen by Sister Eliana. Her betrayal weakened the bond, and the veil grew ravenous. Clara's fingers tightened on the amulet. It wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to controlling the veil, and the Order had twisted its purpose. Miriam clicked the lock open, and they slipped into the alcove. The shelves here were sparse, holding only a few ancient tomes and a wooden box engraved with the veiled symbol. Clara opened the box, revealing a fragile manuscript, its pages brittle with age. Miriam translated the Latin title, The Pact of the Shroud. It detailed the veil's origin, a primordial force, neither god nor demon, bound to the convent's foundation by a blood pact. The amulet was meant to limit its power, but the Order had corrupted the ritual, feeding its souls to gain influence. "There's a way to break the pact," Miriam said, her voice trembling with excitement. "It says the amulet, combined with a willing sacrifice, can sever the veil's tie to this world. But it requires blood, pure, untainted blood." Clara's heart sank. A sacrifice. The word echoed with the weight of Abigail's fate, of Thomas's death. "We're not sacrificing anyone," she said firmly. "There has to be another way." Before Miriam could respond, a low rumble shook the archives, and dust rained from the ceiling. The candle flickered, and a shadow moved at the edge of the alcove, a veiled figure, its form flickering like smoke. Its voice was a hiss, "You cannot break what is eternal." Clara raised the amulet, but the shadow vanished, leaving only a chilling laugh. The veil was toying with them, and time was running out. The rumble faded, but the archives felt alive, the shelves creaking as if the convent itself was stirring. Clara clutched the amulet and the manuscript, her mind racing. The Pact of the Shroud offered a way to destroy the veil, but the cost, a willing sacrifice, was unthinkable. She thought of Thomas, his life stolen by the Order's reach, and of Evelyn, whose fate remained uncertain. The injustice of their losses fueled her, but the veil's growing power was a tide she wasn't sure she could stem. Lydia paced, her wounded arm bandaged with a torn strip of her habit. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice tight. "Constance will find us, and that thing is everywhere." Miriam nodded, clutching the ledger. "We need to get the manuscript to a safe place. Somewhere the Order can't reach. There's a hidden passage behind the chapel, it leads to the cliffs. I found it in the records." Clara agreed, but a nagging doubt gnawed at her. Miriam's knowledge of the convent's secrets was uncanny, almost too convenient. She pushed the thought aside. Miriam had risked everything to help them, but the veil's whispers had planted seeds of paranoia. As they gathered their findings, a soft thud came from the staircase. Clara froze, raising the amulet, its runes glowing faintly. Sister Rose stumbled into the alcove, her face bruised, her eyes wild with fear. You don't know what you've done," she stammered, clutching her side. "Constance is coming. She's awakened the veil fully. It's everywhere." Clara's heart sank. Rose, the reluctant sentry, had survived the crypt, but her presence here felt wrong. "How did you find us?" Clara asked, stepping between Rose and the others. Rose's gaze darted to the manuscript, then back to Clara. I followed you." I want to help. I can't live with this anymore." Her voice cracked, but there was a tremor in her hands, a nervousness that set Clara on edge. Lydia grabbed Rose's arm, her eyes narrowing. "You were guarding the crypt. You're with the Order. Why should we trust you?" Rose sobbed, collapsing to her knees. "I had no choice. They forced me, after Abigail. I didn't want to hurt anyone." Her words were desperate, but Clara's instincts screamed caution. The veil thrived on deception, and Rose's sudden change of heart was too convenient. Before Clara could decide, the archives shook again, and a deafening screech filled the air. The veiled shadow reappeared, larger, its claws scraping the stone. "Traitor!" it roared, its voice aimed at Rose. The nun screamed, blood streaming from her eyes, and collapsed, convulsing. Clara raised the amulet, driving the shadow back, but Rose's body went still, her face frozen in terror. Miriam gasped, backing away. The veil, it killed her for betraying the Order. Clara's blood ran cold. Rose had been a pawn, but her death was a warning. The veil wasn't just hunting them, it was punishing disloyalty. And someone, or something, had led it straight to them. Clara, Lydia, and Miriam fled the archives, the manuscript and ledger tucked inside Clara's habit, the amulet a cold weight in her hand. Rose's death replayed in Clara's mind, a brutal reminder of the veil's power and the Order's reach. The hidden passage behind the chapel was their only hope, but the convent felt like a living trap, its walls pulsing with the veil's malice. Clara's thoughts turned to Evelyn. Had she survived Constance, or had the Order claimed her too? The possibility tightened Clara's chest, a mix of fear and forbidden longing she couldn't shake. They reached the chapel, its stained glass-veiled woman glowing faintly in the moonlight. The feast's chants had ended, leaving an eerie silence. Clara led the way to the altar, where Miriam pointed to a loose stone panel. "The passage is behind this," she whispered, her hands trembling as she pried it open. A narrow tunnel yawned beyond, its air damp and cold. Before they could enter, a voice cut through the silence, "Going somewhere, sisters." Mother Agnes emerged from the shadows, flanked by Constance and 3 veiled nuns, their eyes gleaming with fanaticism. Agnes's face was a mask of cold authority, her hands clasped as if in prayer, but her presence radiated menace. "You've taken what belongs to the veil," she said, her gaze locking onto Clara. "Return it, and your suffering will be brief." Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring. "You killed Thomas," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You've been killing for centuries, hiding behind your faith. It ends now." Agnes's lips curled into a chilling smile. "Faith? The veil is our truth, child. It gives us power, purpose. Your Thomas was a threat, like Eliza before him. And you," her eyes narrowed. "You're just another lamb for the slaughter." Constance stepped forward, her dagger raised, but a figure lunged from the side, Evelyn, battered but alive, her face streaked with blood. "Clara, run!" she shouted, tackling Constance. The veiled nuns surged forward, and chaos erupted. Lydia swung a candelabrum, knocking one nun down, while Miriam shoved the panel open, urging Clara into the tunnel. Clara hesitated, her eyes on Evelyn, who was grappling with Constance, their struggle a blur of blood and steel. "Evelyn!" Clara called, but Agnes raised her hand, chanting in a tongue Clara didn't recognize. The chapel's air thickened, and the veil materialized, its veiled form towering over the altar, its claws slashing toward Evelyn. Clara raised the amulet, its power surging through her, and screamed, "No!" A burst of light erupted, driving the veil back, but the effort left her dizzy, her vision blurring. Lydia grabbed her arm, pulling her into the tunnel as Evelyn's cries echoed behind them. The panel slammed shut, sealing them in darkness, but the veil's roar followed, a promise of vengeance. The tunnel was a suffocating vein of stone, its damp walls closing in as Clara, Lydia, and Miriam fled from the chapel's chaos. The amulet's faint glow was their only light, its runes pulsing like a warning heartbeat. Clara's chest ached with the weight of the ledger, the manuscript, and Evelyn's sacrifice, her cries still echoing in Clara's ears. The veil's roar had shaken the convent, a primal force unleashed by Mother Agnes's chant, and Clara knew they were running out of time. The hidden passage was supposed to lead to the cliffs, to safety, but it felt like a descent into the veil's lair. Lydia stumbled, her wounded arm slowing her, but her defiance held. "We can't keep running," she gasped, clutching the candelabrum she'd grabbed in the chapel. "They'll find us, Clara. That thing, it's everywhere." "We're not running," Clara said, her voice steely despite the fear clawing at her. "We're fighting. The manuscript says the amulet can break the veil's pact. We just need to figure out how." She thought of Thomas, his death orchestrated by the Order, and of Evelyn, whose loyalty remained a painful enigma. The injustice of their losses fueled her, but the veil's power was a tide threatening to drown them all. Miriam, clutching the ledger, adjusted her glasses, her scholarly resolve fraying. The passage should exit near the cliffs, but these tunnels, they are older than the convent. The runes here match the manuscript. This was built to contain the veil, not just worship it. The tunnel widened into a cavern, its ceiling studded with jagged stalactites dripping black water. A faint hum filled the air, the same rhythm Clara had felt in the crypt. At the cavern center stood a stone archway, its frame carved with the veiled symbol, its interior shrouded in an unnatural darkness that seemed to writhe. Clara's skin prickled, the amulet burned against her chest, its runes glowing brighter, as if drawn to the arch. "This must be the exit," Miriam said, but her voice wavered. "Or something else." Before Clara could respond, the cavern shook, and a gust of icy wind snuffed their light. The veil's shadow materialized within the arch, its veiled form more solid now, its claws glinting like obsidian. Its voice was a chorus of torment, "You carry my key, yet you defy me." The amulet flared, and Clara raised it, driving the spectre back, but its laughter echoed, chilling her bones. Lydia swung her candelabrum, her face pale. "We can't fight that thing here. We need to move." Clara nodded, but as they turned to flee, a figure emerged from the tunnel behind them, Sister Constance, her dagger raised, her eyes wild with fanaticism. "You cannot escape the veil," she shrieked, lunging at Clara. Miriam tackled her, but Constance's strength was unnatural, her movements jerky, as if possessed. Clara swung the amulet, its energy knocking Constance to the ground, but the nun rose, blood dripping from her mouth, her laughter mingling with the veils. "We have to destroy the arch," Clara said, her voice urgent. "It's connected to the veil." She grabbed a loose stalactite, smashing it against the arch's frame. The stone cracked, and the veil screamed, its shadow lashing out. Lydia and Miriam joined her, their blows weakening the structure, but Constance seized Miriam's leg, dragging her down. Clara swung the amulet, its light searing Constance's hand, and Miriam broke free. With a final strike, the arch collapsed, the veil's shadow dissipating in a howl of rage. The cavern fell silent, but the victory was fleeting. Constance lay unconscious, her dagger glinting in the dust. Clara's hand shook as she helped Miriam up. "We're not done," she said. "The cliffs. We need to get out." But as they moved, a faint whisper followed, "You cannot outrun me." The tunnel sloped upward, the air growing fresher as Clara, Lydia, and Miriam neared the cliffs. The amulet's glow dimmed, its energy spent, but Clara clutched it tightly, its runes a lifeline against the veil's lingering presence. The ledger and manuscript were heavy in her habit, their secrets, Thomas's death, the Order's centuries of sacrifices, driving her forward. Evelyn's fate gnawed at her, a wound she couldn't close. Had she survived, or had the veil claimed her, as it had so many others? The tunnel opened onto a rocky ledge overlooking the cliffs, the North Sea crashing below, its waves a roar of fury. The night sky was a bruise, stars obscured by rolling clouds. The convent loomed behind them, its spires piercing the fog, a Gothic beast waiting to swallow them. Clara's breath caught, the world outside felt vast, unreachable, after the convent's suffocating walls. Lydia sank to her knees, exhausted, her wounded arm bleeding through its makeshift bandage. "We made it," she whispered, but her eyes were haunted. "Now what?" "We can't go back." "We don't," Clara said, her voice firm. "We used the manuscript to destroy the veil. Then we exposed the Order, Agnes, Constance, all of them." She thought of Thomas, his sister Eliza, and the countless nuns listed in the ledger, their lives erased for the veil's hunger. The injustice of it was a fire in her chest, but the path ahead was fraught with peril. Miriam opened the manuscript, her fingers trembling as she traced the Latin text. "The pact can be broken," she said, her voice low. "But it's not just blood. The amulet needs a conduit, someone tied to the veil's history. Someone with a bloodline connected to the founders." Clara frowned, her mind racing. "A bloodline? How do we find that?" Miriam hesitated, her eyes darting to Clara. "There's something in the ledger I didn't mention. An entry from 1958, about a novice named Eliza Harrow. She wasn't just a nun, she was a descendant of Sister Eliana, the one who stole the amulet. Eliza's bloodline is tied to the veil's binding. And Thomas, her brother." Clara's world tilted. Thomas, her Thomas, had been targeted not just for his questions but for his blood. And she, his lover, had been drawn to Saint Agatha's, perhaps by design. "Are you saying I'm connected to this?" she asked, her voice shaking. Miriam shook her head. "Not directly. But Thomas's death, it was a ritual, Clara. The Order needed his blood to strengthen the veil. And you were bait, to lure him." The revelation was a dagger in Clara's heart. The Order hadn't just killed Thomas, they'd used her love for him, her grief, to trap him. The injustice, the manipulation, was unbearable. She sank to the ground, the amulet slipping from her hand, its runes dull. "They used me," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "They used us both." Lydia placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice soft. "We'll make them pay, Clara. For Thomas, for all of them." But before Clara could respond, a low hum rose from the cliffs, and the amulet flared to life. The veil's shadow appeared at the tunnel's mouth, its veiled form towering, its claws dripping black ichor. "Your blood calls me," it hissed, its voice aimed at Clara. She grabbed the amulet, its power surging through her, but the shadow advanced, undeterred. Miriam screamed, pointing to the convent. Figures were approaching, veiled nuns, led by Agnes, their chant summoning the veil's full might. Clara stood, her resolve hardening. "We fight," she said, raising the amulet. "For Thomas." The cliffs became a battlefield as the veil's shadow loomed, its veiled form a storm of shadow and malice. Clara held the amulet high, its runes blazing, but the energy was draining her, her vision swimming with each pulse. Lydia brandished her candelabrum, her wounded arm trembling, while Miriam clutched the ledger and manuscript, her scholarly calm shattered by the approaching horror. The sea roared below, its waves a mirror to the chaos unfolding, and the convent spires glowed faintly, as if feeding the veil's power. Mother Agnes and her veiled nuns emerged from the tunnel, their chants a rhythmic dirge that amplified the veil's presence. Agnes's face was serene, almost ecstatic, her hands raised like a priestess summoning a god. "You cannot defy the veil," she called, her voice carrying over the wind. "It is eternal, and you are nothing." Clara's rage boiled over, fueled by the ledger's truths, Thomas's ritual death, Eliza's lineage, the centuries of sacrificed nuns. "You murderers," she shouted, the amulet's light flaring. "You used Thomas, used me, to feed your monster. It ends tonight." Agnes laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think you can break the pact? Your blood, Clara, is tainted with grief, with love. The veil thrives on it." She gestured, and the veiled nuns advanced, their movements jerky, as if possessed. The veil's shadow surged forward, its claws slashing toward Clara. Lydia swung her candelabrum, striking a nun, but another tackled her, pinning her to the ground. Miriam threw the ledger at a nun's head, buying time, but the veil's shadow was relentless, its voice a scream, "Give me the key." Clara channeled the amulet's power, a burst of light driving the shadow back, but it left her gasping, her strength fading. From the tunnel, a figure staggered, Evelyn, bloodied but alive, her dagger in hand. "Clara!" she shouted, throwing herself at Agnes. The Mother Superior dodged, her chant faltering, and the veil's shadow wavered. Evelyn's eyes met Clara's, a silent plea for trust, and Clara nodded, their bond a flicker of hope in the darkness. "Get to the cliff's edge!" Evelyn yelled, grappling with Agnes. "The manuscript, use it!" Clara grabbed Miriam and Lydia, pulling them toward the cliff's edge, where the sea spray stunned their faces. Miriam opened the manuscript, shouting the Latin incantation to break the pact, her voice trembling but clear. The amulet burned in Clara's hand, its runes aligning with the words, and the veil screamed, its shadow thrashing. But Agnes broke free, her chant resuming, and the veil surged, its claws grazing Clara's arm. Blood welled, and the shadow's voice roared, "Yours." Clara stumbled, the amulet slipping, and Lydia caught her, screaming her name. Evelyn tackled Agnes again, but the veiled nuns closed in, their daggers glinting. The incantation faltered, and the veil's power grew, the cliffs trembling as if the earth itself would split. Clara clung to the amulet, her vision darkening, Thomas's face flashing before her. She wouldn't let the order win. With a final surge of will, she raised the amulet, shouting the incantation's final words. A blinding light erupted, the veil's shadow shrieking as it was pulled toward the sea, but Agnes's chant countered, and the light flickered. Clara fell to her knees, the amulet's power overwhelming, and the last thing she saw was Evelyn's desperate face, the veil's claws reaching for them all. The cliffs trembled under Clara's knees, the seas roared a deafening chorus as the veil's shadow loomed, its claws dripping black ichor. The obsidian amulet burned in her hand, its runes blazing with a light that seared her skin, but its power was faltering, overwhelmed by Mother Agnes's relentless chant. Clara's vision blurred, blood trickling from the gash on her arm where the veil had struck. Lydia held her upright, her face pale with terror, while Miriam clutched the manuscript, her voice hoarse from shouting the incantation to break the veil's pact. Evelyn grappled with Agnes, their struggle a blur of blood and desperation, but the veiled nuns closed in, their daggers glinting in the moonlight. Clara's mind clung to Thomas, his smile, his blood pooling in that London alley, his death a ritual to feed the veil. The ledger's revelation that she'd been bait, her love for him weaponized by the Order, fueled her rage. She wouldn't let them win, not after Abigail, not after Evelyn's sacrifice. "Keep going," she shouted to Miriam, forcing herself to stand, the amulet's light flickering like a dying star. Miriam's incantation faltered as a veiled nun tackled her, the manuscript slipping from her hands. Lydia swung her candelabrum, knocking the nun back, but the veil's shadow surged, its voice a scream that shook the cliffs, "Your blood is mine." Clara raised the amulet, channeling its power, and a pulse of light drove the shadow back, but the effort left her gasping, her strength draining into the cold stone beneath her. Evelyn's cry cut through the chaos. She'd pinned Agnes, her dagger at the Mother Superior's throat, but Agnes's eyes gleamed with fanatic triumph. "You're too late," Agnes hissed, her chant unbroken. "The veil is unbound." The shadow grew, its veiled form towering over the cliffs, its claws reaching for Clara. Evelyn's gaze met Clara's, a desperate plea, and Clara saw not just defiance but love, a forbidden, reckless love that mirrored her own for Thomas. "Clara, now!" Evelyn shouted, driving her dagger into Agnes's shoulder. The charm broke, and the veil shrieked, its shadow wavering. Clara seized the moment, grabbing the manuscript from the ground and joining Miriam's incantation, their voices rising over the wind. The amulet flared, its runes aligning with the words, and a blinding light erupted, pulling the veil toward the sea. The shadow thrashed, its claws grazing Evelyn, who collapsed, blood pooling beneath her. Lydia dragged Miriam back, but Clara stood her ground, the amulet's power burning through her. The veil's shadow dissolved into the waves, its scream fading, but the victory was hollow. Agnes laughed, blood dripping from her wound, her eyes wild. "You've only delayed it," she rasped. "The veil is eternal, and your blood calls it still." Clara's knees buckled, the amulet slipping from her hand. Lydia caught her, and Miriam grabbed the manuscript, but the veiled nuns regrouped, their daggers raised. Evelyn lay motionless, and Clara's heart shattered, she couldn't lose her, not like Thomas. With a final surge of will, she screamed, "Run!" and Lydia pulled her toward the cliff's edge, the sea spray stinging their faces. The tunnel was their only escape, but the veil's whisper lingered, "You cannot flee." The tunnel swallowed them, its damp walls a claustrophobic maze. Clara stumbled, her arm bleeding, the amulet clutched tightly despite its fading glow. Lydia supported her, her candelabrum raised like a talisman, while Miriam clutched the ledger and manuscript, her glasses fogged with sweat. The cliff's battle had weakened the veil, but Agnes's words echoed in Clara's mind, "Your blood calls it still." The revelation that Thomas's death was a ritual, tied to his sister Eliza's bloodline, had shattered her, but Agnes's cryptic taunt hinted at something worse, a connection Clara didn't yet understand. The tunnel's air was thick, the hum from the crypt returning, softer but insidious. Clara's thoughts churned. Evelyn's sacrifice, her bloodied form on the cliffs, was a wound she couldn't close. Had Evelyn loved her, or was it guilt for her role in Thomas's death? The forbidden pull between them, the echo of her love for Thomas, was a torment Clara couldn't resolve. But she had to keep going, for Thomas, for Abigail, for all the nuns listed in the ledger, their lives stolen by the Order's cruelty. Lydia's voice broke the silence, trembling but fierce. "We can't go back to the convent. Agnes will hunt us, and that thing isn't gone." Her wounded arm hung limp, blood seeping through the bandage. Miriam nodded, her scholarly mind racing. "The manuscript says the pact requires a conduit, a bloodline tied to the founders. Eliza's lineage, Thomas's blood, it's why they targeted him." "But Agnes said your blood, Clara." "I don't understand." Clara's stomach twisted. "I'm not related to Eliza. I was just Thomas's lover." But doubt gnawed at her. The Order had drawn her to Saint Agatha's, used her grief as bait. Was there more they hadn't revealed? She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the tunnel's end, where a faint glow promised an exit. The tunnel opened into a smaller cavern, its walls carved with a veiled symbol, now cracked and weeping black ichor. A wooden door stood at the far end, its frame splintered, as if something had tried to break through. Clara approached, the amulet pulsing faintly, and noticed a faint inscription above the door, Sanguis Puris, Pax Eterna. Miriam translated, her voice shaking, "Pure blood, eternal peace." Before Clara could process the words, the cavern shook, and the veil's shadow reappeared, its form less solid but no less terrifying. Its voice was a hiss, "You bear the mark." Clara raised the amulet, but its power was weak, and the shadow lunged, its claws grazing Lydia's shoulder. Lydia screamed, dropping the candelabrum, and Miriam shoved the door open, shouting, "Go!" They stumbled through, the door slamming shut behind them, but the shadow's laughter followed, seeping through the cracks. The new chamber was a dead end, a circular room with a single, blood-stained altar, its surface etched with runes. Clara's heart sank. They weren't escaping, they'd walked into a trap. The veil had led them here, and the Order was closing in. The chamber was a prison of stone, its altar pulsing with a sickly red glow. Clara's breath hitched, the amulet's faint light revealing chains dangling from the walls, their rusted links stained with old blood. Lydia slumped against the door, her shoulder bleeding, her face pale but defiant. Miriam clutched the manuscript, her eyes scanning the altar's runes, searching for answers. Clara's arm throbbed, her strength waning, but the ledger's weight, proof of the Order's atrocities, kept her grounded. Thomas's death, Eliza's lineage, Evelyn's sacrifice, these were the threads of a tapestry she was only beginning to unravel. Miriam knelt by the altar, her fingers tracing the runes. "These match the manuscript," she said, her voice urgent. "This is a binding site, where the veil's pact was forged." The amulet was meant to control it, but the Order corrupted the ritual, using blood to feed it instead. Clara's mind raced. "So we can use the amulet to break it here? No sacrifice, no blood." She refused to accept the manuscript's demand for a willing sacrifice. Too many had died already, Abigail, Thomas, countless nuns over centuries. The injustice of their erasure was a fire in her chest, but Agnes's words, "Your blood calls it," haunted her. Miriam hesitated, her glasses reflecting the altar's glow. Theoretically, yes. But the veil's stronger now, thanks to Agnes. Would need to complete the incantation perfectly, and even then, her voice trailed off, her eyes flicking to Clara's bleeding arm. Clara followed her gaze, a chill spreading through her. "What aren't you saying, Miriam?" Miriam swallowed, her voice barely audible. "The ledger mentions a marked one, someone whose blood resonates with the veil, even without a direct bloodline. It's rare, tied to emotional bonds, like love or grief. Thomas's death, your connection to him, it might have marked you, Clara." The revelation hit like a blow. Clara's love for Thomas, her grief, hadn't just been bait, it had altered her, tied her to the veil's hunger. Agnes had known, had orchestrated her arrival at St. Agatha's. The injustice of it, the manipulation, was a betrayal deeper than she'd imagined. "They used me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "From the beginning." Lydia grabbed her hand, her grip fierce. "Then use it against them, Clara. If your blood calls the veil, make it choke on it." Before Clara could respond, the door shuddered, and a low hum filled the chamber. The veil's shadow seeped through the cracks, its veiled form coalescing above the altar. Its voice was a venomous purr, "You are mine, marked one." Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring, but the shadow laughed, its claws slashing the air. Miriam began the incantation, her voice trembling, and Clara joined her, their words a desperate shield. But the door splintered, and Constance burst in, her dagger raised, her face a mask of fanaticism. "The veil will have you," she screamed, lunging at Clara. Lydia tackled her, but Constance's strength was unnatural, her eyes glowing with the veil's power. The incantation faltered, and the shadow grew, its claws reaching for Clara's heart. Clara's voice cracked as she chanted, the amulet power burning through her, its runes a fragile barrier against the veil's wrath. Constance's dagger slashed at Lydia, who fought back with feral desperation, her candelabrum clattering to the floor. Miriam's incantation wavered, her hands shaking as she held the manuscript, the altar's red glow pulsing in time with the veil's shadow. Clara's arm bled freely now, each drop seeming to strengthen the spectre, its veiled form towering over the chamber, its claws inches from her chest. "Marked one," it hissed, its voice a chorus of stolen souls. Clara's thoughts flashed to Thomas, his laughter, his blood, and to Evelyn, whose fate remained a gaping wound. The Order had taken everything, her love, her trust, her very soul, marking her for the veil. The injustice of it, the centuries of silenced nuns, fueled her defiance. She wouldn't let the veil win, not while she had breath left. A cry broke through the chaos. Evelyn staggered into the chamber, her habit torn, blood streaking her face, but her dagger gleamed with purpose. "Clara!" she shouted, throwing herself at Constance. The two collided, their struggle a blur of steel and fury. Evelyn's strength was fading, her wound severe, but her eyes burned with a fire Clara recognized, love, reckless and unyielding. "Keep chanting," Evelyn gasped, pinning Constance's arm. Clara and Miriam redoubled their efforts, their voices rising over the veil's screams. The amulet flared, its light cutting through the shadow, but Constance broke free, her dagger slashing Evelyn's side. Evelyn cried out, collapsing, and Clara's heart lurched. She couldn't lose her, not now. Lydia seized the moment, grabbing Constance's wrist and twisting until the dagger fell. Clara stepped forward, the amulet's power surging through her, and slammed it against the altar's runes. A shockwave erupted, the veil's shadow shrieking as it was pulled toward the altar, its form fraying. Constance screamed, her body convulsing as if the veil were abandoning her, and she collapsed, blood pooling from her eyes. The shadow retreated, but not fully, its whisper lingered, "You delay the inevitable." Clara sank to her knees, the amulet dimming, her strength spent. Evelyn crawled to her, her hand reaching for Clara's, their fingers entwining despite the blood and pain. "You're stronger than I was," Evelyn whispered, her voice faint. "Don't let them break you." Clara's tears fell, her heart torn between Evelyn's sacrifice and the fight ahead. Lydia helped Miriam stand, the manuscript clutched tightly, but the chamber's walls trembled, and Agnes's distant chant echoed through the tunnel. The veil was weakened, but not defeated, and the order was coming. Clara squeezed Evelyn's hand, her resolve hardening. "We end this," she said, her voice a vow. "For you. For Thomas." But as they prepared to move, a new shadow stirred in the chamber's corner, its veiled eyes fixed on Clara, and the amulet pulsed with a warning she couldn't ignore. The stone chamber pulsed with a malevolent energy, its blood-stained altar glowing faintly as if mocking Clara's faltering strength. She knelt beside Evelyn, their blooded hands entwined, the amulet's dim glow a fragile barrier against the shadow stirring in the corner. Lydia stood guard, her candelabrum raised despite her bleeding shoulder, while Miriam clutched the manuscript, her incantations' echo still ringing in the air. Constance lay lifeless, her fanaticism extinguished by the veil's wrath, but Mother Agnes's distant chant grew louder, a siren call summoning the spectre back to life. Clara's arm throbbed, her blood feeding the veil's hunger, but her resolve burned brighter. She'd end this, for Thomas, for Evelyn, for the countless nuns silenced by the order's cruelty. Evelyn's breath was shallow, her eyes fluttering as she squeezed Clara's hand. "You have to finish it," she whispered, her voice a thread. "The veil, it's tied to you now." Her words carried a weight Clara couldn't fully grasp, but the pain in Evelyn's gaze, the love beneath her sacrifice, was a dagger in her heart. The forbidden bond between them, so like her love for Thomas, gave Clara strength she didn't know she had. "We're not done yet," Clara said, forcing herself to stand, the amulet heavy in her hand. She helped Evelyn up, supporting her weight, and turned to Miriam. "The incantation, can we try again? Somewhere else?" Miriam's face was pale, her glasses cracked from the struggle. "The altar's power is spent, but the manuscript mentions a heart, the central binding site, deeper in the convent. It's where the pact was first forged. If we can reach it." Lydia cut in, her voice sharp. "And what about Agnes? She's coming, and that thing's not gone." She gestured to the shadow in the corner, its veiled eyes glinting like twin voids. The amulet pulsed, a warning, and Clara felt its cold energy seeping into her, as if the veil were testing her limits. Before Miriam could answer, the chamber shook, cracked spiderwebbing across the walls. The shadow surged, its claws slashing the air, its voice a roar, "You cannot sever me." Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring, but the effort left her dizzy, blood dripping from her nose. Lydia swung her candelabrum, driving the shadow back, while Miriam grabbed the ledger, shouting, "We have to move." The ceiling groaned, stones falling like hail. Clara pulled Evelyn toward the splintered door. Lydia and Miriam close behind. As they stumbled into the tunnel, the chamber collapsed, a deafening roar swallowing the altar's glow. Dust choked the air, and Clara coughed, her vision swimming, but Evelyn's weight against her kept her grounded. The shadows' laughter followed, fainter but unrelenting, a promise of pursuit. They staggered through the tunnel, its walls trembling, the hum of the veil growing stronger. Clara's thoughts raced, Thomas's ritual death, her own, marked, blood, the heart of the pact. The Order had manipulated her from the start, using her grief to lure her here, but why her? The question gnawed at her, a puzzle piece she couldn't place. As they neared the tunnel's end, a faint light beckoned, but so did Agnes's chant, now a chorus of voices, as if the entire Order had joined her. The veil was rallying, and Clara knew they were running into a trap. The tunnel sped them into a forgotten cloister, its crumbling arches overgrown with thorns that seemed to writhe in the moonlight. The convent loomed above, its spires piercing the fog, a Gothic beast roused from slumber. Clara supported Evelyn, whose blood left a trail on the cracked stones, her breathing ragged but defiant. Lydia scanned the shadows, her candelabrum raised, while Miriam clutched the manuscript and ledger, her eyes darting to the cloister's center, a sealed trapdoor carved with the veiled symbol, its edges pulsing with a sickly red light. "This is it," Miriam whispered, her voice trembling. "The heart of the pact. The manuscript says it's below, where the veil was first bound." Her scholarly resolve was fraying, but her determination held, a mirror to Clara's own. Clara's arm burned, her blood seeping through her habit, the amulet's weight a constant reminder of her marked status. The revelation that her love for Thomas had tied her to the veil's hunger was a betrayal she couldn't shake. The Order's injustice, centuries of sacrificed nuns, Thomas's ritual death, Evelyn's suffering, was a fire in her chest, but Agnes's chant was closer now, a venomous tide drawing the veil's power. "We don't have much time," Clara said, helping Evelyn sit against a pillar. "Can you open it, Miriam?" Miriam knelt by the trapdoor, tracing its runes. "It's sealed with a blood lock. It needs a marked one's blood." Her eyes met Clara's, heavy with meaning. Clara's stomach twisted, she was the conduit, the one the veil craved. Every drop of her blood strengthened it, but it might also be the key to its destruction. Lydia's face darkened. "No way. We're not bleeding Clara dry for this. There's got to be another way." Evelyn gripped Clara's hand, her touch weak but fierce. "You don't have to die," she rasped. "The amulet, it can amplify your will. Fight it, Clara." Her eyes held a desperate love, a mirror of the bond Clara had lost with Thomas, and it gave her strength to face the abyss. Clara nodded, slicing her palm with a shard of stone, wincing as blood welled. She pressed it to the trapdoor, and the wounds flared, the seal grinding open with a sound like breaking bones. A staircase descended into darkness, its air thick with the scent of blood and decay. The hum was deafening now, a heartbeat that shook Clara's bones. As they prepared to descend, a figure emerged from the cloister's shadows, Sister Beatrice, not the journal's long-dead author, but a frail, elderly nun Clara had seen only in passing, her eyes hollow with fear. "You can't go down there," Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling. "It's where they took my sister, Margaret. The veil, it doesn't just feed. It changes you." Clara's heart raced. "What do you mean, changes?" Beatrice's gaze dropped, tears streaming. Margaret defied them, like you. They bound her to the veil, not just her blood, but her soul. She's still there, part of it. Her words were a chilling echo of the veil's whispers, and Clara realized the spectre wasn't just a force, it was an amalgamation of its victims, trapped forever. Before Clara could press further, the cloister shook, and the veil's shadow materialized, its veiled form towering, its claws dripping ichor. "You cannot claim what is mine," it roared, lunging for Clara. She raised the amulet, its runes flaring, but the shadow was stronger here, its power rooted in the heart below. Lydia swung her candelabrum, and Miriam pulled Beatrice back, but the shadow's claws slashed the air, inches from Clara's chest. Clara's scream echoed as she channeled the amulet's power, its light driving the veil's shadow back, but the effort left her trembling, blood dripping from her sliced palm. The cloister's thorns seemed to tighten, their barbs glinting like teeth in the moonlight. Evelyn struggled to stand, her bloodied hand reaching for Clara, while Lydia and Miriam shielded Beatrice, whose frail form shook with sobs. The trapdoor yawned open, its staircase a black more promising answers and death. Agnes's chant was a relentless tide, summoning the veil's full might, and Clara knew they had to reach the heart before the order closed in. "We go now," Clara said, her voice hoarse but resolute. She helped Evelyn to her feet, ignoring the pain in her arm, the amulet's cold energy grounding her. Thomas's face flashed in her mind, his laughter, his blood, his death a ritual to feed the veil. Beatrice's warning, that the veil claimed souls like Margaret's, chilled her, but the injustice of the Order's centuries-long reign of terror drove her forward. Lydia led the way, her candelabrum casting jagged shadows down the staircase. Miriam followed, clutching the manuscript, while Clara supported Evelyn, Beatrice trailing behind, her whispers a litany of fear. The air grew heavier, the hum a deafening pulse that vibrated in Clara's chest. The walls were carved with scenes of veiled figures offering blood, their stone faces eerily lifelike, as if watching. The staircase ended in a vast, domed chamber, its ceiling a mosaic of the veiled woman, her hollow eyes seeming to weep black ichor. A massive altar dominated the center, its surface a pool of liquid darkness, rippling with runes that matched the amulets. Chains hung from the walls, their links glistening with fresh blood, and the air was thick with the screams of unseen souls. Clara's stomach churned, this was the heart of the pact, where the veil was born and fed. Miriam opened the manuscript, her voice trembling as she began the incantation. "This is it," she said, her eyes wide. "The amulet and your blood, Clara, it's our only chance." But her gaze flicked to the altar, where the darkness pulsed, and Clara felt the veil's hunger, a pull on her soul that whispered her name. Evelyn gripped Clara's arm, her touch a lifeline. "You're not alone," she said, her voice weak but fierce. "I'm with you, no matter what." The love in her eyes, so like Thomas's, was a balm and a burden, and Clara nodded, steeling herself. But Beatrice screamed, pointing to the shadows. Figures emerged, veiled nuns, their faces hidden, their daggers raised. At their head was Agnes, her shoulder bloodied but her presence commanding, her chant a venomous hymn. "You've come to the heart," she said, her smile chilling. "But you'll never leave." The veil's shadow coalesced above the altar, its form a writhing mass of stolen souls, Margaret's among them, her face flickering in its depths. "Give me the marked one," it roared, and Clara raised the amulet, its runes blazing, knowing this was their last stand. The chamber shook as the veil's shadow loomed, its veiled form a tapestry of torment, Margaret's anguished face flickering within it. Clara stood before the altar, the amulet blazing in her hand, its runes a fragile shield against the spectre's claws. Evelyn leaned against her, blood seeping from her wounds, her dagger raised despite her fading strength. Lydia and Miriam flanked them, the candelabrum and manuscript their only weapons, while Beatrice cowered, her sobs drowned by Agnes's chant. The veiled nuns advanced, their daggers glinting, and Clara felt the weight of the ledger's truths, Thomas's ritual death, the Order's centuries of sacrifices, her own marked blood calling the veil. Miriam's incantation rose, her voice cracking as she chanted the words to break the pact. Clara joined her, the amulet's power surging through her, burning her veins. The altar's darkness rippled, its runes glowing in response, but the veil fought back, its shadow slashing the air, its voice a scream, "You are mine, marked one." Clara's blood dripped onto the altar, each drop strengthening the spectre, and she realized the horrifying truth. Her love for Thomas, her grief, had made her the perfect conduit, a vessel for the veil's hunger. Agnes stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You were chosen, Clara," she said, her voice a venomous caress. "Your mother, a novice here in 59, or you in secret, her blood tied to Ileana's line. She fled, but we found her, and you. Thomas was the bait, but you're the key." The revelation shattered Clara. Her mother, a nun? A descendant of Ileana, the amulet's thief? The Order had hunted her family, used Thomas to lure her here, or to feed the veil. The injustice, the betrayal, was a wound deeper than any claw. "You monsters," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You'll pay for this." Agnes laughed, her chant resuming, and the veil's shadow surged, its claws grazing Evelyn, who cried out, collapsing. Clara caught her, tears streaming, the amulet's light faltering. "Stay with me," she whispered, her heart breaking. Evelyn's love, her sacrifice, was a mirror of Thomas's, and Clara couldn't lose her too. Lydia swung her candelabrum, holding the nuns at bay, while Miriam's incantation reached a crescendo. Clara pressed her bleeding palm to the altar, the amulet against her heart, and screamed the final words. A blinding light erupted, the veil's shadow shrieking as it was pulled into the altar, its form fraying. Agnes's chant faltered, her face twisting with rage, but the veiled nuns charged, their daggers aimed at Clara's heart. Clara stood her ground, the amulet's power consuming her, Evelyn's hand in hers. The veiled souls, Margaret, Abigail, countless others, screamed for release, and Clara vowed to free them, even if it cost her life. But as the light faded, a new shadow stirred, and Agnes's voice rose again, promising a final, devastating blow. The chamber roared with the veil's fury, its shadow riding above the altar, a tapestry of stolen souls, Margaret, Abigail, and countless others, screaming for release. Clara stood defiant, the amulet blazing in her bloodied hand, its runes a flickering shield against the spectre's claws. Evelyn clung to her, her wounds bleeding freely, her eyes burning with a love that anchored Clara's faltering strength. Lydia fought off the veiled nuns, her candelabrum a blur of steel and rage, while Miriam's incantation trembled, the manuscript's pages fluttering in the unnatural wind. Mother Agnes's chant surged, her voice a venomous tide summoning the veil's full might, her eyes fixed on Clara with a chilling triumph. Clara's heart pounded, the revelation of her mother's lineage, a novice tied to Ileana's bloodline, still raw. The Order had hunted her family, used Thomas as bait, and marked her as the veil's conduit, her love and grief a weapon against her. The injustice of it, the centuries of sacrificed nuns, fueled her rage, but the amulet power was consuming her, her vision darkening with each pulse. She pressed her bleeding palm harder against the altar, the runes drinking her blood, and screamed the incantation's final words alongside Miriam. The altar's darkness erupted, a vortex of light and shadow pulling the veiled spectre inward. Its screams shook the chamber, souls like Margaret's flickering in its depths, their faces bleeding. Clara's knees buckled, the amulet searing her hand, but Evelyn's touch kept her grounded. "You're doing it," Evelyn whispered, her voice faint but fierce. "Don't stop." But Agnes's chant twisted, her words shifting to a darker tongue, and the vortex faltered. The veiled nuns surged, their daggers slashing at Lydia, who cried out as a blade grazed her arm. Miriam's voice cracked, the incantation stuttering, and Clara realized with horror that something was wrong. Miriam's eyes were wide, not with fear, but with guilt. She dropped the manuscript, stepping back, her hands trembling. "Miriam, what are you doing?" Clara shouted, her voice raw. The veil's shadow swelled, its claws reaching for her, and the amulet's light dimmed, its power disrupted. Miriam's face crumpled, tears streaming. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They have my sister. The Order, they promised to let her go if I..." Her voice broke, and Clara's blood ran cold. Miriam had betrayed them, sabotaging the incantation, feeding the veil's strength. The scholar Clara had trusted, the ally who'd uncovered the manuscript's secrets, was a pawn of the Order. Lydia lunged at Miriam, but a veiled nun tackled her, pinning her to the ground. Agnes laughed, her chant reaching a crescendo, and the veil's shadow solidified, its claws grazing Clara's chest. Evelyn swung her dagger, driving a nun back, but her strength was fading, blood pooling beneath her. Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring weakly, and pushed against the shadow, but Miriam's betrayal had tipped the scales. The vortex collapsed, the altar's runes going dark, and the veil roared in triumph, "You are all mine." Clara fell to her knees, the amulet slipping, her vision swimming. Evelyn caught her, their blood mingling, and Clara clung to her, refusing to give up. "We're not done," she gasped, her voice a vow. But as the veiled nuns closed in, and Agnes's chant drowned the chamber, Clara knew they were out of time. The heart of the pact was their last hope, but betrayal had brought it crashing down. The chamber was a maelstrom of shadow and steel, the veiled spectre towering over the altar, its claws dripping ichor as it fed on Clara's blood. Evelyn held Clara upright, their hands entwined, her love a lifeline against the crushing despair of Miriam's betrayal. Lydia struggled against the veiled nuns, her candelabrum knocked away, blood streaming from her arm. Miriam stood frozen, tears streaking her face, the manuscript at her feet, her sabotager wound deeper than any dagger. Mother Agnes's chant was a relentless hymn, her eyes gleaming with fanatic joy as the veil's power surged, its souls, Margaret, Abigail, Thomas, screaming within its depths. Clara's chest heaved, the amulet's dim glow a flicker of hope in the darkness. Her mother's lineage, her marked blood, had been the Order's trap, but she refused to be their sacrifice. The injustice of Thomas's death, the centuries of silenced nuns, burned in her, a fire that refused to die. "We have to get out," she rasped, pulling Evelyn toward the staircase. "The manuscript, we can try again." Lydia broke free, grabbing the manuscript and shoving Miriam aside. "You traitor," she spat, her voice raw with rage. Miriam sobbed, reaching for her, but Lydia pushed past, helping Clara and Evelyn. The veiled nuns surged, their daggers glinting, and Agnes's charm twisted, summoning the veil's claws to block the staircase. Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring weakly, and screamed, "Back!" A pulse of light drove the shadow back, but the effort left her staggering, blood dripping from her nose. Evelyn swung her dagger, clearing a path, but her wounds slowed her, her face pale. Lydia dragged Miriam along, the manuscript clutched tightly, her loyalty to Clara outweighing her anger. They reached the staircase, the chamber trembling as the veil's shadow roared, its claws slashing the air. Agnes's voice followed, a chilling promise, "You cannot flee the veil, Clara. Your blood binds you." The words echoed the revelation of Clara's mother, a novice tied to Eliana's line, and Clara's rage flared. She'd been a pawn from birth, her life shaped by the Order's cruelty. The staircase was a blur of stone and shadow, the hum of the veil deafening. Clara supported Evelyn, her warmth a reminder of what she was fighting for. At the top, they stumbled into the cloister, its thorns glinting like eyes in the moonlight. The trapdoor slammed shut, muffling the veil's screams, but Agnes's chant carried through the walls, a sign the Order was close. Lydia panted, her arm bleeding. "Where now?" "The cliffs are a death trap, and the convent's theirs." Clara's mind raced, the manuscript's words echoing, "The heart of the pact, a willing sacrifice." She refused to accept that, but Miriam's betrayal had cost them their chance. "The library," she said, her voice firm. "There might be more in the archives, something to finish the incantation." She glanced at Evelyn, whose eyes held a fading light, and vowed to save her. But as they moved, a shadow flickered in the cloister's arches, a veiled figure, not the veil, but something human, watching. Clara's heart sank. The Order wasn't done, and Miriam's betrayal was only the beginning. The convent's corridors were a labyrinth of menace, the moonlight casting jagged shadows as Clara, Evelyn, Lydia, and Miriam raced toward the library. Clara supported Evelyn, her blooded hand gripping hers, the amulet's dim glow a fragile beacon. Lydia led the way, the manuscript and ledger tucked under her arm, her face a mask of fury at Miriam's betrayal. Miriam trailed behind, her sobs a constant reminder of her treachery, but Clara couldn't abandon her, not yet. The veil's hum pulsed through the walls, weaker but persistent, and Agnes's chant was a distant echo, signaling the Order's pursuit. Clara's marked blood, her mother's lineage, weighed on her, but Thomas's memory, Evelyn's love, and the ledger's truths drove her forward. The library was a cavern of dust and secrets, its shelves looming like silent judges. Clara helped Evelyn to a chair, her wounds critical, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me," Clara whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Evelyn's face. The love in Evelyn's eyes, so like Thomas's, was a balm against the horror, but it also terrified her. She couldn't lose another. Lydia barred the door with a bookshelf, her arm bleeding through its bandage. "This won't hold long," she said, glaring at Miriam. "What's your sister worth, huh? You nearly killed us all." Miriam sank to the floor, her glasses fogged with tears. "They took her last year," she whispered. "They said they'd free her if I didn't want to hurt you." Her voice broke, and Clara's heart twisted. Miriam was a victim, too, trapped by the Order's cruelty, but her betrayal had cost them dearly. "Focus," Clara said, turning to the shelves. "We need something to complete the incantation, something about the heart." She scanned the archives, her fingers brushing ancient tomes, the amulet pulsing faintly. Miriam, desperate to redeem herself, joined her, pulling a crumbling scroll from a hidden nook. "This," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a ritual addendum, written by Ileana herself." Clara unrolled the scroll, its Latin text detailing a failsafe for the amulet, a way to break the pact without a sacrifice, using the marked one's will to sever the veil's tie. "It's possible," Clara said, hope flickering. "But it needs a pure intent, untainted by fear or doubt." Her own doubts, her grief for Thomas, her fear for Evelyn, were a barrier she'd have to overcome. Evelyn gripped her hand, her voice faint. "You can do it, Clara. You're stronger than they know." Her love was a lifeline, but her weakening pulse was a ticking clock. Before Clara could respond, the door shuddered, and Agnes's voice boomed, "Surrender, Clara, or the veil will claim you all." The walls trembled, the veil's shadow seeping through the cracks, its veiled eyes fixed on Clara. Lydia raised her candelabrum, but Miriam stepped forward, her face resolute. "I'll hold them," she said, grabbing a heavy tome. "Go, Clara. Finish it." Clara hesitated, torn by Miriam's redemption, but Evelyn's fading light pushed her forward. The veil's shadow lunged, and the library became a battlefield, the fight for the convent soul raging on. The library erupted into chaos as the veil's shadow surged, its veiled form a writhing mass of stolen souls, its claws slashing the air. Clara clutched the scroll and amulet, Evelyn leaning against her, her blood pooling on the dusty floor. Lydia swung her candelabrum, driving back the shadow's tendrils, while Miriam hurled tomes at the door, where Agnes's chant grew louder, the order's veiled nuns pounding against the barricade. Clara's marked blood, her mother's lineage, made her the veil's target, but the scroll's ritual offered a chance to end it, if she could overcome her fear and grief. "Clara, go!" Miriam shouted, her voice fierce despite her tears. She shoved another shelf against the door, her betrayal now a desperate bid for redemption. The heart finished the ritual. Her eyes met Clara's, a silent apology, and Clara nodded, trusting her sacrifice. Lydia grabbed the manuscript and ledger, pulling Clara and Evelyn toward a hidden alcove Miriam had mentioned, a passage to the heart's chamber. The veil's shadow roared, its claws grazing Lydia's back, and she cried out, blood seeping through her habit. Clara raised the amulet, its runes flaring, and a pulse of light drove the shadow back, but the effort left her gasping, her vision swimming. Evelyn stumbled, her strength nearly gone, but her hand gripped Clara's, her love a fire that burned through the darkness. "You're enough," she whispered, her voice a thread. Clara's heart broke, the echo of Thomas's loss mingling with her fear for Evelyn, but she pushed forward, the scroll's words a beacon. The alcove's passage was narrow, its walls weeping black ichor, the hum of the veil deafening. Clara supported Evelyn, Lydia limping behind, the ledger and manuscript heavy in her arms. The library's door splintered, Agnes's voice booming, "You cannot hide, marked one." The veil's shadow followed, its form seeping through the walls, its voice a chorus of torment, "Your soul is mine." The passage opened into the heart's chamber, the massive altar pulsing with liquid darkness, its runes glowing red. Clara set Evelyn against a pillar, her blood staining the stone, and opened the scroll, her hands trembling. The ritual required her will, pure and untainted, but her doubts, her grief for Thomas, her fear for Evelyn, were a storm in her mind. Lydia barred the passage's entrance, her candelabrum raised, but the veil's shadow materialized, its claws slashing her arm. She screamed, collapsing, and Clara raised the amulet, chanting the scroll's words, her voice shaking. The altar's runes flared, the darkness rippling, but Agnes's chant echoed through the chamber, and the veiled nuns appeared, their daggers glinting. The veil's shadow surged, its claws aimed at Clara's heart, and Evelyn's desperate cry, "Clara!" was the last thing she heard as the darkness closed in. The heart's chamber pulsed with malevolent energy, the altar's liquid darkness rippling like a living wound. Clara stood at its edge, the amulet blazing in her blooded hand, its runes a desperate shield against the veil's towering shadow. Evelyn slumped against a pillar, her wounds bleeding freely, her eyes flickering with a love that anchored Clara's faltering resolve. Lydia lay crumpled near the passage, her arm gashed by the veil's claws, her candelabrum lost in the chaos. The veiled nuns surrounded them, their daggers glinting, while Mother Agnes's chant rose like a venomous tide, summoning the veil's full might. Clara's marked blood, tied to her mother's lineage, to Eliana's betrayal, called to the spectre, its voice a chorus of stolen souls, "Yield, marked one." Clara's chest heaved, the scroll's ritual burning in her mind. Eliana's failsafe required a pure will, untainted by fear or doubt, but her grief for Thomas, her fear for Evelyn, was a storm threatening to drown her. The Order's injustice, Thomas's ritual death, her mother's hidden past, centuries of sacrificed nuns, fueled her rage, but Miriam's betrayal had shaken her trust. She glanced at Evelyn, whose fading pulse was a ticking clock, and vowed to end this, no matter the cost. "Keep going," Clara shouted, her voice raw, resuming the scroll's incantation. The amulet flared, its runes aligning with the altar's, and the darkness began to churn, a vortex forming at its center. The veil's shadow shrieked, its claws slashing the air, souls like Margaret and Abigail writhing within it, their faces pleading for release. Agnes's chant countered, her eyes gleaming with fanatic triumph. "You cannot break what is eternal," she roared, raising a blooded dagger, its blade etched with the veiled symbol. Lydia stirred, grabbing a fallen dagger and lunging at a veiled nun, her defiance unbroken despite her wounds. "Clara, do it," she gasped, tackling another, buying time. Evelyn struggled to her feet, her dagger trembling in her hand, and staggered to Clara's side, her touch a lifeline. "You're stronger than me," she whispered, her voice faint. "Finish it, for us." Her laugh, reckless and forbidden, mirrored Clara's bond with Thomas, and it gave her the strength to push through her doubts. Clara pressed her bleeding palm to the altar, the amulet against her heart, and screamed the incantation's final words. The vortex surged, pulling the veil's shadow inward, its screams shaking the chamber. Agnes's chant faltered, her face twisting with rage, and she lunged at Clara, her dagger aimed at her heart. Evelyn threw herself between them, the blade sinking into her chest. "No!" Clara screamed, catching Evelyn as she fell, blood pooling between them. The amulet blazed, its power consuming Clara, and the vortex roared, swallowing the veil's shadow. Souls poured forth, Margaret, Abigail, countless others, their faces fading as they found release. The chamber shook, cracks splitting the walls, and Agnes fell to her knees, her chant silenced, her eyes wide with terror. The veiled nuns collapsed, their daggers clattering, as if the veil's departure had broken their will. Clara held Evelyn, tears streaming, the amulet dimming in her hand. "Stay with me," she sobbed, but Evelyn's eyes were closing, her breath a whisper. "You did it," she murmured, her hand falling limp. Clara's heart shattered, the loss of Evelyn echoing Thomas's death, a wound she'd never heal. The altar's darkness went still, the hum fading, but Clara knew the victory was incomplete. Agnes was alive, and the veil's whisper lingered, a faint echo in the shadows. The chamber was a ruin of stone and blood, the altar's darkness now a lifeless pool, its runes extinguished. Clara knelt beside Evelyn, her lifeless body cradled in her arms, tears mingling with the blood on her face. The amulet lay dull in her hand, its power spent, a hollow relic of the battle they'd won, and lost. Lydia staggered to her feet, her arm bleeding, her face etched with grief as she gazed at Evelyn. Mother Agnes lay slumped against a wall, her blooded dagger at her side, her fanatic zeal broken but her eyes still burning with defiance. The veiled nuns were motionless, their veils fallen, revealing faces twisted with fear, as if the veil's departure had stripped their purpose. Clara's chest ached, the weight of Evelyn's sacrifice crushing her. Her love for Evelyn, so like her bond with Thomas, had been a beacon in the darkness, but now it was another wound, another injustice carved into her soul. The Order had taken everything, her mother's secret past, Thomas's life, Evelyn's future, all to feed the veil's hunger. The ledger's truths, the scroll's ritual, had freed the trapped souls, but at a cost Clara couldn't bear. She pressed her forehead to Evelyn's, whispering, "I'm sorry," her voice breaking. Lydia knelt beside her, her hand on Clara's shoulder. "She saved us," she said, her voice hoarse. "She saved you. Don't let that be for nothing." Her words were a lifeline, but the pain was raw, a mirror of Thomas's death in that London alley. Clara nodded, clutching the amulet, its runes cold but still etched with Ileana's hope. Miriam's absence gnawed at Clara. She'd stayed behind in the library, her redemption a fragile thread. Had she survived, or had the Order claimed her too? Clara's trust, shattered by Miriam's betrayal, was slow to mend, but her sacrifice had bought them time. She stood, helping Lydia up, and turned to Agnes, whose breathing was shallow, her face pale but defiant. "You've lost," Clara said, her voice trembling with rage. "The veil's gone. Your pact is broken." Agnes's lips curled into a weak smile, her voice a rasp. "You think you've won? The veil is eternal, child. You've only severed its tether, for now." Her words chilled Clara, a reminder of the spectre's lingering whisper. "Your blood, your mother's line, it's still marked. You'll never escape." Clara's rage flared, but before she could respond, the chamber shook, dust raining from the ceiling. A faint hum returned, softer but insidious, and the amulet pulsed, its runes flickering. Clara's heart sank. The veil wasn't destroyed, only weakened, and Agnes's words suggested a deeper trap. She grabbed the ledger, its pages proof of the Order's crimes, and vowed to expose them, but first, they had to escape. Lydia pointed to a secondary tunnel, its entrance half hidden behind a collapsed chain. "We can't go back the way we came," she said, her voice urgent. "Agnes's followers are still out there." Clara nodded, helping Lydia carry Evelyn's body, refusing to leave her behind. They moved toward the tunnel, Agnes's laughter echoing behind them, a chilling promise of retribution. But as they crossed the threshold, a shadow flickered in the tunnel's depths, not the veil, but something human, veiled, unwatching. Clara's blood ran cold. The fight wasn't over, and the convent's secrets were far from buried. The tunnel was a suffocating maze, its walls slick with ichor, the faint hum of the veil a ghostly echo. Clara and Lydia staggered forward, Evelyn's lifeless body a heavy burden between them, the amulet clutched in Clara's blooded hand. The ledger, proof of the Order's centuries of injustice, was tucked inside Lydia's habit, its weight a reminder of their mission, to expose Mother Agnes and her followers, to honor Thomas, Evelyn, and the countless nuns sacrificed to the Veil. Clara's heart was a raw wound, Evelyn's loss a mirror of Thomas's death, but her rage at the Order's manipulation, her mother's hidden lineage, her marked blood, kept her moving. The shadow in the tunnel's depths haunted Clara, its veiled form human yet unnatural, its presence a silent threat. Lydia's breathing was ragged, her wounds slowing her, but her defiance held. "We're not alone," she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. "That thing, it's not the Veil, but it's not friendly." Clara nodded, the amulet's faint pulse a warning. Agnes's words, "The Veil is eternal," gnawed at her, suggesting a deeper truth. The scroll's ritual had freed the trapped souls, but the Veil's essence lingered, tied to her blood, her mother's line to Liliana. The injustice of it, the Order's centuries-long reign of terror, was a fire she couldn't extinguish. She thought of Evelyn's final words, her love a beacon, and vowed to finish what they'd started. The tunnel sloped upward, the air growing fresher, a faint glow promising an exit. But the shadow moved, faster now, its veiled form gliding silently. Clara raised the amulet, its runes flickering, and shouted, "Show yourself." The shadow paused, its veiled eyes glinting, and a voice, soft, female, eerily familiar, whispered, "You're not ready, marked one." Clara's heart raced. The voice wasn't Agnes's, nor any nun she'd met, but it carried a weight of knowledge, of pain. Before she could respond, the shadow vanished, leaving only a faint laugh that chilled her bones. Lydia gripped her arm, her face pale. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Clara said, her voice trembling. "But it knows me." The amulet pulsed, its runes dim but alive, a sign the Veil's influence wasn't gone. They pressed on, the tunnel opening into a rocky cave overlooking the cliffs, the North Sea crashing below. The convent loomed in the distance, its spires glowing faintly, as if mocking their escape. Clara laid Evelyn's body gently on the cave floor, her tears falling anew. She tucked the amulet into her habit, its weight a reminder of her burden. Lydia knelt beside her, the ledger in her hands, her voice soft. "We'll get them, Clara. For Evelyn, for Thomas. We'll burn this place down." Clara nodded, her resolve hardening, but the cave's shadows stirred, and the veiled watcher reappeared, its form clearer now, a woman, her veil embroidered with the same runes as the amulet. "You've freed the souls," she said, her voice a ghostly echo. "But the Veil lives in you, Clara. Your mother's blood, your love, it's the final key." Clara's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" she demanded, but the watcher vanished, her laughter mingling with the sea's roar. The amulet flared, its runes glowing brightly, and Clara realized with horror that the Veil wasn't gone, it was inside her, waiting. Agnes's trap had been deeper than she'd known, and the fight for her soul was far from over. The cave overlooking the North Sea was a jagged sanctuary, its walls glistening with salt and shadow. Clara knelt beside Evelyn's lifeless body, her hands trembling as she brushed a blood-matted strand from her face. The amulet hung heavy around her neck, its runes faintly glowing, a cruel reminder of the Veil's presence within her. Lydia stood at the cave's mouth, clutching the ledger, her wounded arm bandaged with torn fabric, her eyes scanning the cliffs for signs of pursuit. The sea roared below, its waves a mirror to Clara's turmoil, the veiled watcher's words echoing in her mind, "The Veil lives in you, Clara. Your mother's blood, your love, it's the final key. Clara's chest ached, the weight of loss, Thomas's ritual death, Evelyn's sacrifice, her mother's hidden lineage, crushing her. The Order of the Shroud had orchestrated her life, marking her blood as the Veil's conduit, trap set before her birth. The injustice of it, the centuries of sacrificed nuns listed in the ledger, fueled her rage, but the Veil's whisper, now a faint pulse within her, threatened to unravel her resolve. She felt it stirring, a cold hunger that fed on her grief, her love, and she feared what it might make her become. Lydia's voice broke the silence, sharp with urgency. "Clara, we can't stay here. Agnes is alive, and her followers won't stop. We need to get the ledger out, expose them." She held up the blood-stained book, its pages proof of the Order's atrocities, Thomas's murder, Abigail's sacrifice, countless others. But her eyes softened, seeing Clara's pain. "Evelyn, she'd want you to keep fighting." Clara nodded, tears falling, but the amulet pulsed, and a vision flashed, Evelyn's face, twisted into the Veil's veiled shadow, her voice whispering, "You're mine." Clara gasped, clutching the amulet, its cold energy grounding her. Was it a trick, or was Evelyn's soul trapped within the Veil, like Margaret and Abigail? The thought was unbearable, a fresh wound atop Thomas's loss. A rustle at the cave's entrance made Lydia spin, her dagger, taken from a fallen nun, raised. A figure emerged, not a veiled nun, but a woman in tattered civilian clothes, her dark hair streaked with grey, her face weathered but fierce. "Don't strike," she said, her voice low, raising empty hands. "I'm not with them. I'm Eliza Harrow, Thomas's sister." Clara's heart stopped. Eliza, the novice who'd fled St. Agatha's in the 1970s, whose bloodline tied her to Eliana, the amulet's thief. Thomas had died searching for her, and now she stood here, a ghost from Clara's past. "How did you find us?" Clara asked, her voice trembling, the amulet pulsing as if recognizing Eliza. Eliza's eyes, so like Thomas's, held the haunted wisdom. "I've been watching the convent, waiting for a chance to strike back. I saw the light on the cliffs, felt the veil weaken." "You did that, didn't you?" She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the amulet. "But it's not over. The veil's in you now, Clara." "I know, because it tried to claim me too." Clara's blood ran cold. Eliza's words confirmed her fear. The veil's essence, bound to her marked blood, was a living curse. "Can we stop it?" she asked, her voice breaking. "For good?" Eliza's face hardened. "Maybe. But we need to destroy the convent's foundation, where the pact was forged. And we need to do it before Agnes rebuilds the veil's power." She glanced at Evelyn's body, her expression softening. "I'm sorry for your loss. But we have to move, now." Clara stood, the ledger and amulet heavy with purpose, her grief for Evelyn and Thomas a fire that refused to die. The veil's whisper stirred, but she pushed it down, vowing to fight for their memory. The cave's shadows flickered, and the sea's roar called her forward, into the final battle. The cliffs were a treacherous path, their rocky ledges slick with sea spray, the convent spires looming like sentinels in the fog. Clara led the way, the amulet's faint glow guiding her, its runes a constant reminder of the veil's presence within her. Eliza followed, her movements sure despite her age, her dagger glinting with quiet menace. Lydia carried the ledger, her wounds slowing her but her defiance unbroken, her eyes scanning the shadows for the Order's veiled nuns. Evelyn's body rested in the cave, a promise Clara made to return for her, her lover wound up bled with every step. The revelation of Eliza's survival, her connection to Eliana's bloodline, was a lifeline and a burden. Clara's mother, a novice tied to the same line, had borne her in secret, marking her as the Veil's conduit. The Order's manipulation, Thomas's death, her own entrapment, was a tapestry of injustice, and Clara's rage at their cruelty burned brighter than her fear. But the Veil's whisper, now a cold pulse in her veins, threatened to consume her, its hunger feeding on her grief for Evelyn and Thomas. Eliza's voice cut through the wind, low and urgent. The foundations beneath the chapel, a sealed chamber older than the convent. I found it before I fled, but I couldn't destroy it alone. The amulet's your weapon, Clara, but it'll fight you, hard. Her eyes, haunted by decades of running, held a warning Clara couldn't ignore. Before Clara could respond, a shadow moved on the cliff above, a veiled nun, a dagger flashing as she leapt. Clara dodged, the amulet flaring, and Eliza tackled the nun, her dagger sinking into her shoulder. The nun screamed, her veil falling to reveal a young face twisted with fanaticism. More shadows appeared, 3 veiled nuns descending like specters, their chants echoing Agnes's hymn, summoning the Veil's power. Lydia swung her dagger, clashing with a nun, her wounded arm trembling. "They're everywhere," she shouted, blood seeping through her bandage. Clara raised the amulet, its runes blazing, and a pulse of light drove the nuns back, but the effort left her dizzy, the Veil's whisper surging. "Use me," she pushed it down, refusing to let it control her, but the nuns regrouped, their daggers aimed at her heart. Eliza fought with a ferocity that belied her years, her dagger a blur, but a nun's blade grazed her side, and she stumbled. Clara lunged, swinging the amulet like a club, its metal striking the nun's temple. The nun collapsed, but the Veil's shadow flickered in the fog, its veiled form coalescing, its voice a hiss. "You cannot deny me." Clara's blood called to it, her marked status a beacon, and she felt its hunger clawing at her soul. Lydia dispatched the final nun, her face pale with exhaustion. "We can't keep this up," she gasped, clutching the ledger. "We need to reach the chapel, now." Clara nodded, helping Eliza stand, the amulet's weight a reminder of her burden. The cliffs stretched toward the convent, its spires glowing faintly, a trap waiting to spring. The Veil's whisper grew louder, and Clara feared what she might become if she failed to destroy it. The convent's chapel was a hollowed shell, its stained glass veiled woman shattered, shards glinting like eyes in the moonlight. Clara, Eliza, and Lydia slipped inside, the amulet's dim glow casting eerie shadows across the altar. The ledger, proof of the Order's atrocities, was tucked in Lydia's habit, its weight a vow to expose Mother Agnes and her followers. Clara's heart pounded, Evelyn's loss a raw wound, her love for her and Thomas a fire that burned through the Veil's cold whisper within her. Her mother's lineage, her marked blood, made her the Veil's conduit, but she refused to be its vessel. Eliza led them to the altar, her fingers tracing a hidden seam in the stone. "The foundations below," she whispered, her voice tight. "A chamber where the pact was forged. The amulet can destroy it, but you'll need to face the Veil, inside you." Her eyes, so like Thomas's, held a pain Clara recognized, a shared grief for the brother lost to the Order's cruelty. Clara nodded, the amulet pulsing against her chest, its runes a warning. The Veil's whisper was a constant pressure, feeding on her grief, her love, and she feared it might twist her into something monstrous. The injustice of the Order's manipulation, her mother's secret, Thomas's ritual death, Evelyn's sacrifice, was a rage that kept her grounded, but the chapel's air was thick, the hum of the veil returning, a heartbeat in the walls. Lydia barred the door with a pew, her wound slowing her, her face etched with determination. "Agnes won't let us do this," she said, her voice low. "She's out there, rallying what's left of the order." Before Clara could respond, the chapel shook, and the altars seemed split, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The hum surged, and a veil's shadow materialized above the altar, its veiled form less solid but no less terrifying, its claws dripping ichor. "You cannot destroy what you are," it hissed, its voice aimed at Clara, her blood calling it forth. Eliza drew her dagger, her face grim. "Go, Clara. I'll hold the door with Lydia. You face it, alone." Her words were a command, but her eyes held a mother's fear, a sister's grief, and Clara realized Eliza saw her as family, bound by Thomas's love. Clara hesitated, the amulet's weight a burden she wasn't sure she could bear. But Evelyn's final words, "You're enough," echoed, and she stepped toward the staircase, the veil's shadow following, its laughter chilling her bones. Lydia and Eliza braced the door, but Agnes's chant broke through, a venomous hymn summoning the veil's power. The chapel was a battleground, and Clara was descending into its heart, where her fate, and the convent's, would be decided. The staircase spiraled into an abyss, its stone steps slick with black ichor, the hum of the veil a deafening pulse. Clara descended alone, the amulet glowing faintly, its runes a fragile shield against the darkness. The veil's whisper was a cold tide within her, feeding on her grief for Evelyn and Thomas, her marked blood a beacon for its hunger. Her mother's lineage, tied to Eliana's betrayal, had made her the Order's pawn, but Clara's rage at their injustice, centuries of sacrificed nuns, Thomas's murder, Evelyn's death, burned brighter than her fear. She would destroy the veil, even if it meant facing herself. The staircase ended in a vast, subterranean chamber, its walls carved with the veiled woman's symbol, now pulsing with a sickly red light. A central pillar dominated the space, its surface a writhing mass of runes, the foundation of the veil's pact. Chains hung from the ceiling, their links dripping blood, and the air was thick with the screams of unseen souls. Clara's stomach churned. This was where the Order had forged their blood pact, where countless lives had been fed to the veil's hunger. The amulet flared, its runes aligning with the pillars, and Clara felt its power surge, a cold fire in her veins. The veil's shadow materialized, its veiled form a tapestry of torment, souls like Evelyn's flickering within it, their faces bleeding. "You are part of me," it roared, its claws reaching for her heart. Clara raised the amulet, chanting Eliana's ritual from memory, her voice trembling but resolute. The pillar's runes glowed, a vortex forming at its base, pulling the shadow inward. But the veil fought back, its whisper twisting into Clara's mind, "You loved them, and they died. You are the curse." Visions flashed, Thomas's bloodied body, Evelyn's final breath, her mother's unseen face, each a dagger in her soul. Clara stumbled, the amulet's light flickering, her doubts threatening to break her. The veil's hunger was her own, her grief its fuel, and she feared she might become the monster she fought. A sound broke through, footsteps on the staircase. Clara spun, expecting Agnes, but it was Lydia, bloodied but alive, her dagger raised. "Eliza's holding the chapel," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "Agnes is coming, Clara. Finish it." Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. She pressed her bleeding palm to the pillar, the amulet against her heart, and screamed the ritual's words, her voice rising over the veil's roars. The vortex surged, the shadow fraying, but Agnes's chant echoed from above, and a new shadow appeared at the chamber's edge, not the veil, but a veiled figure, its embroidered runes matching the amulet. The watcher from the cave, its voice a ghostly whisper, asterisk, you must choose, Clara, destroy the veil, or become it. Clara's heart raced, the amulet burning, the pillar's vortex threatening to consume her. The choice was hers, but the cost was everything. The subterranean chamber trembled, its pillar of writhing runes pulsing with a malevolent red glow, the heart of the veil's ancient pact. Clara stood before it, the amulet blazing in her blooded hand, its runes a desperate shield against the veil's towering shadow. The spectre's veiled form loomed, a tapestry of stolen souls, Margaret, Abigail, and, most painfully, Evelyn, flickering within its depths, their screams a chorus of torment. Lydia braced the staircase's entrance, her dagger raised, blood seeping from her wounds, her face etched with defiance. The veiled watcher stood at the chamber's edge, its embroidered runes mirroring the amulets, its ghostly voice echoing, choose, Clara, destroy the veil, or become it. Clara's chest heaved, the weight of her marked blood, tied to her mother's lineage, to Ileana's betrayal, crushing her. The veil's whisper was a cold tide within her, feeding on her grief for Thomas, her love for Evelyn, threatening to twist her into the monster she fought. The Order's injustice, Thomas's ritual death, Evelyn's sacrifice, centuries of silenced nuns, burned in her, but the Watcher's ultimatum was a knife at her soul. Destroying the veil might mean sacrificing herself, her blood the final key, but becoming it would doom everyone she'd fought for. Lydia's shout broke through, her voice raw. Clara, do it. Whatever it takes. She swung her dagger at a veiled nun climbing the staircase, her strength fading but her loyalty unwavering. Mother Agnes's chant echoed from above, a venomous hymn summoning the veil's power, her surviving followers closing in. Clara's vision swam, the amulet searing her hand, its power amplifying her will but also the veil's hunger. She pressed her bleeding palm to the pillar, the runes drinking her blood, and resumed Ileana's ritual, her voice trembling but resolute. The vortex at the pillar's base surged, pulling the veil's shadow inward, its screams shaking the chamber. The Watcher stepped closer, its veiled eyes piercing. Your love makes you weak, it whispered, its voice eerily familiar, like her mother's, though Clara had never known her. Embrace the veil, and you'll never lose again. Clara's heart raced, the vision of Evelyn's final breath flashing before her. No, she said, her voice a vow. I choose them, Thomas, Evelyn, all of them. She channeled her love, her grief, into the amulet, its runes blazing brighter, and the vortex roared, the shadow fraying. But the veil fought back, its claws slashing her chest, blood welling, and Clara stumbled, the Watcher's laughter chilling her bones. Agnes appeared at the staircase, her blooded shoulder not slowing her, her eyes wild with fanatic triumph. You're mine, marked one, she screamed, raising a dagger etched with the veiled symbol. Lydia tackled her, but Agnes's strength was unnatural, her chant amplifying the veil's power. Clara's doubts surged, her fear of becoming the veil, her guilt for Evelyn's death, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the ritual, her voice rising over the chaos. The pillar's runes flared, the vortex consuming the shadow, but Clara felt the veil's essence within her, a cold fire threatening to take over. She screamed the ritual's final words, her blood pouring into the pillar, and the amulet shattered, its fragments glowing like stars. The veil's shadow dissolved, its souls, Evelyn's among them, fading with a sigh of release, But Clara collapsed, her vision darkening, the Watcher's voice whispering, "You've only begun." The chamber was a ruin, the pillar's runes extinguished, its vortex collapsed into a lifeless scar. Clara lay on the blood-soaked stone, her chest gashed, her breath shallow, the amulet's fragments scattered around her like fallen stars. The veil's shadow was gone, its soul's freed, but its whisper lingered in her mind, a faint echo of its hunger. Lydia knelt beside her, bloodied and battered, her dagger still clutched, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Mother Agnes lay crumpled at the staircase, her dagger broken, her chant silenced, her fanatic zeal shattered. The veiled nuns had fled or fallen, their purpose extinguished with the veil's defeat. Clara's heart ached, Evelyn's loss a wound that would never heal, her love for her and Thomas a fire that had carried her through. The revelation of her mother's lineage, her marked blood, was a burden she'd borne alone, but the Order's injustice, Thomas's ritual death, centuries of sacrificed nuns, was a fight she'd won. The ledger, proof of their crimes, rested with Lydia, a vow to expose the Order's remnants. But the Watcher's final words, "You've only begun," chilled her, a hint that the veil's essence might still linger within her. Lydia helped Clara sit, her voice trembling. "You did it, Clara. It's over." But her eyes flicked to the pillar, where a faint hum pulsed, a shadow of the veil's power. "We need to get out, now. The convent's coming down." Clara nodded, her strength fading, but she refused to leave without honoring Evelyn. Her body, in the cave, she whispered, tears falling. Lydia's face softened, and she helped Clara stand, supporting her as they climbed the staircase, the chamber trembling, cracks splitting the walls. The convent was collapsing, its foundation shattered with the veil's defeat, a fitting end to its centuries of horror. They reached the chapel, its shattered stained glass a mosaic of ruin. Eliza Harrell stood at the door, bloodied but alive, her dagger dripping, a pile of veiled nuns at her feet. Her eyes, so like Thomas's, held a fierce pride as she saw Clara. "You broke it," she said, her voice low. But Agnes escaped. She's rallying what's left of the Order outside. Clara's rage flared, the thought of Agnes evading justice unbearable. "We'll find her," she said, clutching the amulet's fragments, their faint glow a reminder of her burden. The convent shook, dust raining from the ceiling, and Eliza led them outside, the cliffs a chaotic battlefield under a storm-heavy sky. The sea roared, its waves crashing against the rocks, as if celebrating the convent's fall. But as they stepped onto the cliffs, a figure emerged from the fog, Agnes, her blooded habit torn, her eyes wild with a new fanaticism. Behind her stood a handful of veiled nuns, their chant summoning a faint shadow, a remnant of the veil's power. "You freed nothing," Agnes hissed, her dagger raised. "The veil lives in you, Clara, and I'll carve it out." Clara raised the amulet's fragments, their glow flaring, and braced for the final fight, her heart heavy with loss but burning with purpose. The cliffs were a storm-swept arena, the seas roar a deafening chorus as Clara faced Mother Agnes, the amulet's fragments glowing in her blooded hand. Lydia stood at her side, her dagger raised, her wounds a testament to her loyalty. Eliza flanked them, her eyes burning with decades of vengeance for Thomas, her dagger glinting in the lightning. Agnes's veiled nuns chanted, their voices summoning a faint shadow, a twisted echo of the veil, its veiled form flickering like a dying flame. Clara's marked blood pulsed, the veil's essence within her a cold whisper, but her love for Evelyn and Thomas, her rage at the Order's injustice, was a fire that refused to die. Agnes's face was a mask of fanatic rage, her blooded dagger edged with a veiled symbol, a chant of venomous him. "You think you've won," she screamed, her voice carrying over the wind. "The veil is eternal, and your blood is its vessel. You'll become what you fear." Her words struck Clara's doubts, the fear that the veil's hunger might consume her, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the ledger's truths: Thomas's murder, Evelyn's sacrifice, centuries of silenced nuns. Clara stepped forward, the amulet fragments flaring, their light cutting through the fog. "You used me," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You killed Thomas, Evelyn, my mother's hope. You'll pay for it all." She channeled Ileana's ritual, the fragments amplifying her will, and the shadow wavered, its form fraying under her defiance. Agnes lunged, her dagger aimed at Clara's heart, but Eliza tackled her, their struggle a blur of steel and blood. Lydia fought the veiled nuns, her dagger clashing, her wounds slowing her but her fury unrelenting. Clara raised the fragments, chanting the ritual's words, her blood dripping onto the cliffs, the sea's waves seeming to rise in response. The shadow shrieked, its claws slashing the air, but Clara's will, forged by love, tempered by loss, was stronger. Eliza drove her dagger into Agnes's shoulder, pinning her to the ground, but Agnes's chant continued, her eyes gleaming with madness. "You'll never be free," she screamed, and the shadow surged, its claws grazing Clara's chest. Blood welled, and the veil's whisper roared within her, "Become me." Clara stumbled, her vision darkening, but Evelyn's voice echoed in her mind, "You're enough," and she pushed back, her love for her and Thomas a shield against the darkness. With a final scream, Clara slammed the amulet's fragments into the ground, the ritual's power erupting in a blinding light. The shadow dissolved, its echo fading into the sea, and Agnes's chant broke, her body convulsing as the veil's remnant abandoned her. The veiled nuns collapsed, their daggers falling, their fanaticism extinguished. Clara fell to her knees, her strength spent, the fragments dull in her hand, the veil's whisper silenced at last. Eliza helped Lydia stand, their faces pale but triumphant. Agnes lay still, her eyes empty, her reign of terror ended. The convent spires crumbled in the distance, a fire spreading through its ruins, a cleansing blaze for centuries of horror. Clara looked to the sea, her heart heavy with loss but light with hope, the fight finally over. The cliffs were silent, the storm clouds parting to reveal a dawn of pale gold. Clara stood at the edge, the sea's waves a gentle murmur, the convent's ruins smouldering in the distance. The ledger rested in her hands, its blood-stained pages a testament to the Order's crimes, a promise to expose their remnants to the world. Eliza stood beside her, her face weathered but peaceful, her grief for Thomas eased by their victory. Lydia leaned against a rock, her wounds bandaged, her eyes bright with a survivor's resilience. The amulet fragments were gone, scattered into the sea, their power spent, but Clara felt their weight in her soul, a reminder of her marked blood, now free of the veil's curse. Evelyn's body had been laid to rest in the cave, a quiet ceremony under the stars, her love a memory Clara would carry forever. Thomas's photograph, tucked in her pocket, was a tether to the life she'd lost, but also to the strength she'd found. Her mother's lineage, her connection to Ileana, was a truth she'd embrace, a legacy of defiance against the Order's injustice. The veil was gone, its souls freed, Evelyn, Abigail, Margaret, countless others, but its whisper had left a scar, a haunting echo she'd always hear. Eliza touched her arm, her voice soft. "You did what I couldn't, Clara. Thomas would be proud." Her eyes, so like his, held a shared grief, a shared triumph, and Clara nodded, tears falling. They were family, bound by loss and love, and they'd rebuild together. Lydia joined them, the ledger in her hands. "We'll take this to the authorities," she said, her voice firm. "The order's done, but their secrets aren't. We'll make sure no one forgets." Her defiance, tempered by pain, was a mirror to Clara's, and they shared a silent vow to honor the fallen. Clara looked to the horizon, where the dawn's light touched the sea, a promise of renewal. The convent's ruins were a grave for its horrors, but also a monument to those who'd fought: Evelyn's love, Thomas's courage, Ileana's rebellion. Clara's marked blood was no longer a curse, but a strength, a legacy of survival. She felt the veil's scar within her, a faint whisper, but it was hers to carry, not to fear. As they turned to leave, a breeze stirred, carrying a faint, familiar voice, Evelyn's, or perhaps her own heart, whispering, "You're enough." Clara smiled, tears falling, and stepped into the dawn, her soul haunted but whole, ready to face the world beyond the veil. The London street was alive with the hum of life, vendors hawking newspapers, taxis weaving through the morning fog, pedestrians bundled against the chill of early spring 1986. Clara stood on a bustling corner, a sketchpad under her arm, her pale blonde hair loose for the first time in years, catching the faint sunlight. At 26, her emerald eyes still carried the weight of St. Agatha's convent, the scars of a year that had reshaped her soul. The black novice's habit was gone, replaced by a simple coat and scarf, but the amulet's fragments, now a pendant around her neck, were a quiet reminder of the veil's shadow, its whisper a faint echo she'd learned to live with. The ledger, blood-stained and heavy with the Order of the Shroud secrets, had been her weapon in the months since the convent's fall. Clara and Eliza Harrow had delivered it to a tenacious journalist, a woman unafraid of the church's reach, who'd published a series of exposés tearing open the order's centuries of atrocities. The names of the sacrificed nuns, Abigail, Margaret, countless others, were no longer whispers in the walls but cries for justice, printed in bold ink. Mother Agnes's death on the cliffs had ended her reign, but the order's remnants, scattered and disgraced, faced trials that promised no mercy. Thomas's murder, a ritual to feed the veil, was now a public wound, his name cleared, his art celebrated in a small gallery Clara had helped establish. Yet justice was a bitter balm. Clara's sketchpad held portraits of Thomas, his rugged smile frozen in charcoal, and Evelyn, her fierce eyes softened by love, their faces a gallery of loss. The revelation of her mother's lineage, a novice tied to Ileana, the amulet's thief, had redefined her, a legacy of defiance she'd embraced. Her marked blood, once the veil's conduit, was now a scar, a strength forged in fire. The convent's ruins, smouldering in the northern hills, were a grave for its horrors, but also a monument to those who'd fought: Evelyn's sacrifice, Thomas's courage, Lydia's loyalty, Eliza's redemption. Clara's fingers brushed the pendant, its runes dull but warm, a relic of the amulet that had shattered the veil's pact. The spectre's essence, once a cold tide within her, was silent now, but its scar lingered, a whisper in her dreams. She'd felt it on the cliffs, when the veiled watcher, a ghostly echo of Ileana, or perhaps her mother, had warned her of the veil's eternity. Eliza had taught her to guard against it, to channel her grief into purpose, but Clara knew the veil's hunger was never truly gone, only dormant, waiting for a crack in her will. A familiar voice broke her thoughts. "Clara!" Lydia called, weaving through the crowd, her chestnut curls bouncing, her arm scarred but healed from the convent's battles. At 22, Lydia's rebellious spark had returned, tempered by a survivor's wisdom. She carried a newspaper, its headline screaming, "Convent Scandal, Final Arrests Made." "They got the last of Agnes's followers," Lydia said, her grin fierce. "Your ledger did that." Clara managed a smile, but her heart was heavy. "It's not enough," she said, her voice soft. "Evelyn, Thomas, they are still gone." The injustice of their losses, the Order's manipulation of her life, was a wound time couldn't close. Lydia's hand found hers, a silent anchor, their bond forged in blood and fire. "They are not gone," Lydia said, her eyes bright. "They are in you, in us. We're their fight now." She pulled Clara into a hug, and for a moment, the London noise faded, replaced by the memory of Evelyn's whisper, "You're enough." Clara clung to it, her tears falling, a promise to keep fighting, to honor the fallen. Eliza joined them, her weathered face softened by a rare smile. Thomas's sister, now a mentor, carried the same haunted wisdom Clara saw in herself. "We've got a meeting with the gallery," Eliza said, her voice low. "Thomas's work, it's selling. People want to know his story." Her eyes, so like Thomas's, held a shared grief, a shared triumph, and Clara nodded, her sketchpad a bridge to his memory. They walked together, the city a canvas of renewal, but Clara's gaze drifted to the skyline, where the horizon hinted at the northern hills. The convent's ruins called to her, a pull she couldn't ignore. That night, she boarded a train, the pendant warm against her chest, drawn to the place where her life had shattered and reformed. The ruins of St. Agatha's were a skeletal husk, its spires crumbled, its stones blackened by the fire that had consumed it. Clara stood at the cliff's edge, the sea's roar a mournful hymn, the fog curling like ghosts. She'd buried Evelyn here, under a simple stone, her name carved beside Thomas's, a memorial to their love. The ledger's truths had freed their souls, but Clara felt their presence, a warmth against the veil's scar. She knelt, sketching the ruins, her charcoal tracing the chapel's broken arches, the veiled woman's shattered glass. The pendant pulsed, and a breeze stirred, carrying a faint whisper, not the veil's, but Evelyn's, or perhaps her own heart, "You're safe now." Clara's tears fell, smudging the sketch, but she smiled, the pain a companion, not a chain. A figure appeared in the fog, not a veiled nun, but a woman in a tattered cloak, her face obscured by a scarf. Clara tensed, the pendant flaring, but the woman raised a hand, her voice soft, familiar. "You did what I couldn't," she said, her eyes glinting with tears. "I'm proud, Clara." The scarf slipped, revealing a face like Clara's, older, worn, the mother she'd never known, a novice who'd fled the Order's grasp. Clara's breath caught, the pendant glowing warmly. "You're her," she whispered, tears streaming. The woman nodded, stepping closer, but her form flickered, a ghost bound to the ruins. "I loved you," she said, her voice breaking. "Live, Clara. For me, for them." She faded, her touch a breeze, and Clara sobbed, the pendant's glow fading, her mother's presence a final gift. She stood, the sketchpad under her arm, the ledger's truths a vow to keep fighting. The veil's scar was hers to bear, a haunting echo, but so was her strength, forged by love and loss. Clara looked to the sea, the dawn's light touching the waves, a promise of renewal. She was haunted, but whole, ready to face the world beyond the veil. As she turned to leave, a faint laugh carried on the wind, not the veil's, but Evelyn's, Thomas's, her mother's, a chorus of those she'd freed. Clara smiled, her heart light, and stepped into the future, the ruins a monument to their victory, the dawn a canvas for her redemption.